12 soldiers, one valley, no way out. The enemy had been waiting for them, every exit sealed, every ridge covered, every radio frequency jammed. Captain Ethan Cole watched his men bleed into the snow and understood, with cold clarity, that someone had sold them to their deaths. Then a rifle cracked from somewhere above the clouds. One shot, one dead enemy commander. Chaos where there had been precision. Nobody on Cole's team fired it. Nobody knew where it came from. And the enemy, 200 fighters who had been advancing like clockwork, suddenly stopped moving. If you've never subscribed to this channel, do it right now, because the story you're about to hear doesn't end where you think it does. Drop a like, leave a comment with your city or country so I can see how far this story has traveled, and stay with me until the last word. You will not see this ending coming. The mission brief had been 12 pages long, and Ethan Cole had read every word 3 times. He did that with every mission, not because he didn't trust his memory, but because the third read always caught the thing the first 2 missed. A grid coordinate that didn't quite line up. A timeline that assumed perfect weather. A phrase like minimal resistance expected that, in his experience, was how analysts said we actually have no idea what's waiting for you. This brief had all of it. Ravenfall Ridge, classified weapons storage site. Grid 7 Tango November 4. Estimated enemy presence, light security detail, 12 to 15 personnel. Mission window, insertion 2200 hours, extraction no later than 0430. Then, at the bottom of page 11, buried under 3 paragraphs of logistics, intelligence confidence level, moderate. Moderate. Cole had folded the brief, tucked it into his left breast pocket, and looked across the briefing table as Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, his second, his steadiest, the man who had been running alongside him for 6 years across 4 different combat zones. Webb looked back at him with the flat expression of a man who had also read the word moderate. 12 to 15, Webb said. That's what it says. And if it's not 12 to 15? Cole had picked up his coffee, which was cold, and said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. What? They flew in by rotary, 2 Blackhawks running low and dark over the peaks, no lights, no radio chatter beyond the minimum. The Ravenfall Range in winter was a different world, a black and white world, all shadow and ice, the kind of cold that didn't just chill you, but settled into your joints and made them ache. Cole had operated in the Hindu Kush, in northern Norway, in the Altai Range along the Mongolian border. He knew mountain cold. This was something else. The air at altitude here had a particular bite, thin and dry, that dried out the sinuses and made every exhale visible. 12 men. Cole's Tier 2 element, designated Raptor Team, drawn from the 75th Ranger Regiment with 2 attached Special Forces weapons sergeants for the technical work at the site. They came in fast, rotors feathering, and touched down on a flat ledge 3 kilometers north of the objective, far enough to avoid triggering any perimeter sensors, close enough to make the approach window. The Blackhawks were gone before the snow settled from their downdraft. "Raptor, go secure," Cole said into the radio. Nothing back but squelch. The radios were on tight beam frequency, short range, the kind that didn't light up on enemy intercept gear. He got acknowledgement clicks from the team leads. Good enough. They moved in 2 files, Cole on the left, Webb on the right, 4 men back in each line, 2 tail-end Charlies watching the 6th. Specialist Ray Okafor was on point, and Cole had asked for him specifically. Okafor had grown up hunting whitetail in the Pennsylvania mountains and moved through terrain the way most people move through hallways. Quiet, deliberate, reading the ground before his foot came down. The approach to Grid 7 Tango November 4 took 90 minutes. The terrain was broken, loose shale slopes, frozen creek beds, ravines that didn't appear on the satellite imagery because the imagery was 4 months old and the snowmelt had changed the ground geometry. Cole noted 3 spots where the approach route would need adjusting on exfil, committed them to memory, kept moving. The weapons site, when they reached its outer perimeter, was not what the brief had described. It was more. Cole went prone behind a boulder at the ridgeline and pressed his binoculars to his eyes. Below, in a natural bowl formed by the valley floor, he counted what the brief called a light security detail. 2 guard towers, both occupied, with searchlights running overlapping arcs. A vehicle park. 3 trucks, one with a heavy machine gun mounted. What looked like a portable radar array, its dish rotating slowly against the dark sky. and figures moving between structures that were too uniform, too tactical in their spacing, to be a dozen guards. He counted 27 before he stopped counting. He pulled the binoculars down and looked at Webb, who was prone beside him. "Moderate," Webb said very quietly. "Yep." "What do you want to do?" Cole thought for exactly 4 seconds. The weapon's sight was real. He could see the hardened storage bunkers, the blast doors. The mission was real, and pulling back meant coming back, which meant another approach, another window, and whatever was in those bunkers sitting under enemy control for another 72 hours minimum. "We go in," he said. "Adjusted approach. South side. Use the creek bed for cover. Okafor on point to the inner wire, then we split. Demo team on the bunkers. Rest on perimeter containment." "They've got radar." "It's pointed outward. We're already inside the radius." Webb studied the objective for another moment. "All right." Then after a pause, "I want Diaz close." Private First Class Ana Diaz was their combat medic. Webb asking for her close meant Webb was already calculating casualties. Cole didn't say anything to that. He just gave the hand signal to move. They made the inner wire without contact. That part, at least, went the way the brief said it would. The breach point was a natural gap in the wire, not deliberate, just the result of a fence stake that had shifted in frozen ground and created a 6-inch low spot that Okafor found by crawling the entire perimeter on his belly for 20 minutes while everyone else held position and the temperature dropped another 4 degrees. Cole made a mental note to put Okafor in for a commendation, assuming they lived. The demo team, Sergeant Cruz and the 2 SF weapons sergeants, Kaplan and Torres, went for the southern bunker. Cole took the rest on containment, spread positions covering the guard towers, the vehicle park, the approach routes from the north. For 11 minutes, it went perfectly. Cruz's voice came over the tight beam in a whisper. "South bunker secure. We've got material. Give me 6 minutes for demo setup." "Copy. Raptor 2. Hold positions," Cole murmured. That was when the radar array stopped rotating, not powered down. Stopped. Froze mid-rotation, dish pointing northeast. Cole watched it and felt the specific cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Someone had gotten a return. Someone, somewhere, was looking at a screen and seeing something that shouldn't be there. He keyed the radio. "Cruz, accelerate." "I need 4 more. Accelerate, Cruz, we've been made." The first flare went up from the northern ridge before Cruz finished his transmission. Not a standard illumination flare, a cluster, 3 simultaneous bursts that turned the valley floor white bright and left no shadows to hide in. "Contact north." That was Corporal Hayes, voice tight. "Multiple. I've got multiple. They're coming down the ridge." Then the East Guard Tower's searchlight swung and locked onto Webb's position, and the machine gun on the truck opened up, and the world became very loud, very fast. Cole had been in firefights before, plenty. The thing people who hadn't been in them didn't understand was that they didn't feel chaotic from the inside. They felt narrowing. The brain did something automatic, something evolution had spent 10,000 years perfecting. It cut out everything irrelevant and left only the immediate geometry of survival. Where cover was. Where fire was coming from. What the most dangerous thing was, right now, in this exact second. Right now, the most dangerous thing was the machine gun. It was tearing through the rocks around Webb's position, and Webb's team was pinned. Couldn't move left because the slope dropped off. Couldn't move right because that was open ground. Cole could see Webb behind a boulder the size of a refrigerator, and that boulder was taking hits, and rock chips were flying, and it wasn't going to be enough. "Okafor truck gun, go!" Cole called. "Moving!" Okafor came around the left side of the creek bed in a dead sprint, angle that kept terrain between him and the gun, and came up with his M4 from behind a culvert wall and put 2 quick bursts into the truck. Not the gunner, not yet, but the windshield and the hood, and the driver who'd been trying to reposition the vehicle lurched sideways and the gun swung wide, and Webb's team broke cover and moved. "Cruz, I need that demo now," Cole said into the radio. 30 seconds. Cruz. 30 seconds, sir." Cole pulled his rifle to his shoulder and started working, picking targets by threat priority, the way he'd been trained. Anyone with a radio first, then crew-served weapons, then the fighters in the open. He dropped a man with a handheld radio unit near the northern approach. Shifted. Dropped a fighter trying to set up a position behind the vehicle park. But there were more than 27. A lot more. They were coming from everywhere, From the ridge lines Cole had assessed as too steep to descend quickly, from a draw to the southeast that hadn't shown on any imagery, from behind the guard towers where a second layer of fighting positions had been dug into the frozen ground and were invisible until the men standing in them rose and started shooting. Cole. Webb's voice was different now, not tight, but flat, which was worse. North exit is covered. They're on the ridge. Cole checked. Webb was right. The northern ridge line, their planned exfil route, had fighters moving along its crest, setting up a blocking position. Classic encirclement. Come in through one valley entrance, herd the target toward the exit, close the exit. South? Cole asked. South is the bunkers. Cruz has demo in place. East? Silence on the radio for a moment. Then Hayes. East is Iron Fang Pass. It's narrow. Sir. A pause, the sound of Hayes breathing hard. They'd have to know we'd look at it. They might have it covered. They might, Cole agreed. He did the math. 12 men. Running low on 5.56, Okafor had been burning through magazines at the truck gun, and Hayes' team had lit up the northern approach. They had maybe 20 minutes of sustained fire before they were throwing rocks. The radios were behaving strangely. He'd been trying to reach the extraction birds on the long-range set and getting bursts of static that were patterned, not random. Someone was jamming, specifically, on their extract frequencies. That meant someone knew their frequencies. Cruz, Cole said. Demo status. Set, on your word. Blow it. We're done here. We exfil north and push through whatever's on that ridge. Roger that. Firing in 5. The first explosion wasn't Cruz's. It came from the eastern ridge, a single, sharp crack, so precise and so isolated from the ongoing firefight noise that Cole's head turned instinctively toward it. Not artillery. Not an RPG. A rifle. A single rifle shot, at extreme range, with a sound signature that spoke of a very heavy caliber. Down in the valley, the enemy commander, the man Cole had identified by his different radio, his different behavior, the way the other fighters kept looking toward him, crumpled into the snow without a sound. The enemy fighters kept moving because in a firefight, momentum is a physical thing and it doesn't stop just because one man falls. But the coordination changed. Subtle at first. A slight hesitation in the encirclement movement, a moment where the blocking force on the northern ridge slowed because the signal they were waiting for didn't come. Then the heavy weapon on the truck exploded. Not from ground fire, from above. Something hit the gun mount from an angle that the valley walls should have made impossible, and the mount and the gunner and the ammunition went up in a ball of secondary fire that lit the valley orange. One rifle, 2 shots. Cole was still staring at the eastern ridge when Webb appeared at his shoulder, breathing hard, bleeding from a gash on his forearm that he hadn't mentioned and probably wouldn't. You see that? Webb said. I saw it. That's not one of ours. No. Then who? I don't know. Cole made himself look away from the ridge and back at the battlefield because staring at questions didn't win fights. Cruz, blow the bunkers. Raptor, consolidate on my position. We're going north. The explosion when Cruz hit the trigger was enormous. The underground bunker vented upward through its blast doors and threw a column of fire and debris 40 meters into the sky. The shockwave was physical, something Cole felt in his chest even from 300 meters away. Whatever had been in those bunkers, it was gone. The enemy fighters, already disrupted by the loss of their commander and their vehicle weapon, broke for cover. That bought maybe 3 minutes. Cole used all 3. They pushed north hard, moving in a staggered column, covering each other's movement the way they'd trained. One element moving while the other covered, leapfrogging up the slope toward the ridgeline. The enemy on the ridge was there, but disorganized. Without the commander's timing signal, the blocking force had moved too early and crowded itself into a narrow section of trail where they couldn't establish proper fields of fire. Cole's team hit them at close quarters. The fight on the northern ridge took 4 minutes and felt like 40. CQB in the dark, in the cold, on terrain that rolled and dropped without warning. It was the kind of fighting where training took over completely, where conscious thought was too slow, where the body moved on muscle memory alone. Cole cleared a fighting position with Webb beside him and came up with his rifle, and the next 2 seconds were a blur of motion and noise, and he was past it and moving again. When they broke through to the far side of the ridge, they had 9 men standing. Diaz was working on 2 others. Okafor had taken a round through his left bicep. Through and through, Diaz said. No arterial involvement. He could still hold his rifle if he kept his grip loose. Corporal Singh had a leg wound that was more serious. Shrapnel from a grenade, deep but not bone, and Diaz had packed it and put Singh between two soldiers who were effectively carrying him while pretending they weren't. Cole did the count twice. "Where's Petrov?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. Then Hayes said quietly, "Petrov didn't make the ridge, sir." Cole stood still for exactly 2 seconds. Petrov was 23 years old from Spokane, Washington. He collected vintage baseball cards. Made a terrible coffee that he was inexplicably proud of. "All right," Cole said, and moved. "What?" They found a defensive position in a natural rock formation 300 meters down the far slope, a cluster of boulders that offered cover on 3 sides and a clear sight line back toward the ridge. Cole set the team into it, got a head count, checked ammunition states, and tried the long-range radio again. Static. Still jammed. "Webb," Cole said. "Sir?" "We've got maybe 20 minutes before they regroup and push north. We're short on ammunition, we've got 2 men who can't move independently, and our extract frequency is jammed." He laid it out flat, no inflection, the way he'd always done it, because the team needed information, not management. "What's your read?" Webb was quiet for a moment, looking back toward the ridge. "That shooter," he said. "Whoever it was, they saw the whole valley. They knew exactly where to put those shots." "Yeah. They're still up there." Cole followed Webb's look. The eastern ridge, jagged and dark, was invisible now. No more gunfire from it, no movement, nothing, just the mountain. But Webb was right. Whoever had fired those shots had been watching the entire engagement from above, and they had made choices about when to intervene and when not to. That suggested intent. That suggested someone who was still there, still watching. Cole keyed his radio to a frequency that wasn't in any mission brief, an old emergency channel, rarely used, kept in his head the way a man kept a house key he'd never expected to need. "This is Raptor 6. We have wounded and we're pinned north of the objective. If you're listening and you're the one on the eastern ridge," he paused, "we could use a conversation." Static. Then, after a silence long enough that Cole almost wrote it off, a voice, female, flat and controlled and very, very tired. "You're in the wrong position. Move your team 50 meters northeast to the secondary boulder cluster. You're still silhouetted against the snowfield from the south." Cole looked at the snowfield behind them. He looked at Webb. Webb was already moving to gather the team. The voice spoke again before Cole could respond. "And for what it's worth, that's a good emergency frequency to know. Most people have forgotten it exists." Then nothing. Cole stared at the radio for a moment. Then he put it in his pocket and went to help carry Singh. Behind them, unseen, somewhere in the dark geometry of the eastern ridge, something moved. Barely a shift in the shadows, less than a breath of sound, and then was still again. The secondary boulder cluster was exactly where the voice said it would be. Cole didn't know whether that was reassuring or unsettling, and he decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that the new position was better. The snowfield was behind rock now instead of behind them. The approach from the south was channeled through a natural choke point, and there was overhead cover from a granite overhang that would break their thermal signature from any drone running IR. Whoever she was, she knew this terrain better than his satellite imagery did. He got the team settled. Diaz worked on Singh's leg in silence, using a headlamp set to its lowest red setting, hands moving with the particular efficiency of someone who had done this too many times in too many bad places. Okafor sat with his back against a boulder and held his rifle across his knees and didn't complain, which was standard for Okafor. The others found positions, checked sectors, conserved ammunition the way you did when you weren't sure how much longer you'd need it. Cole sat with the radio. He keyed the emergency frequency again. "You still there?" Longer silence this time. He was beginning to think she'd moved, gone dark, relocated, decided the conversation wasn't worth the risk. Then, "Still here. You have a name? Does it matter right now?" "Suppose not." He watched the ridge to the south. Movement there. Figures silhouetted briefly against the sky, then gone. The enemy was regrouping the way he'd expected. "How many are we looking at?" "Total." A pause. Not hesitation, assessment. The difference was audible. Before the bunker went up, I counted 114. You've accounted for approximately 30. Call it 80 remaining, give or take. They have 2 more crew-served weapons, 1 PKM in the vehicle park, which is currently without a crew, and a heavy mortar they haven't deployed yet. The mortar team is staged at the southern entrance of the valley. Cole processed that. Mortar. Yes. Why haven't they used it? Because their commander wanted prisoners. He thought you were a larger element. He was waiting to see how many of you there were before he committed the mortar. He didn't want to blow up whatever intelligence value you might carry. Their commander is dead. Yes. Whoever's running it now doesn't have the same restraint. I'd expect the mortar to be moving to a firing position within the next 10 minutes. Cole looked at Webb. Webb had been listening and was already drawing in the snow with a stick, a rough sketch of the valley, the ridge positions, the approach routes, thinking through options. What's your position? Cole asked. Why? Because if there's a mortar coming into play, I need to know where you are so I can keep you out of the fire plan. Another pause. Then, Eastern Ridge, elevation approximately 240 meters above your current position. I have good coverage of the valley floor and the southern approach. Limited coverage of the northern route. Terrain blocks it. Ammunition state? The silence that followed was answer enough. Sufficient, she said finally, which was what a soldier said when the real answer was not enough. Come down, Cole said. I beg your pardon? Come down off that ridge. Join my position. 12 men fighting together is better than 11 men and 1 sniper running independent. That's not a pause. That's not how I operate. I know, but your way of operating just got complicated by a mortar team, and mine just got complicated by 80 fighters, so maybe we adjust. He kept his voice level, not pushing, not ordering, just laying it out. Your call, but the offer stands. He released the transmit button and waited. 30 seconds, a minute. He watched Webb finish the terrain sketch and start marking fields of fire, the way Webb always did. Instinctively, almost compulsively, turning every position into a tactical problem with a solution. Then, from somewhere up the eastern slope, there was a sound. Barely a sound. The shift of a boot on frozen rock, deliberate and controlled. The sound of someone moving who knew exactly how to move and was choosing to be heard just enough. Cole looked up. She came down out of the dark like she was part of it, appearing not from a specific point, but from the mountain itself, one moment nothing, and then a figure materializing at the edge of the overhang's shadow. She was in a ghillie suit that had been modified beyond anything Cole had seen in a standard issue catalog. Strips of local vegetation worked into the fabric, a matte finish on every piece of equipment that might catch light. The rifle on her back was a .338 Lapua, suppressed, with a scope that probably cost more than Cole's truck. She was moving with a slight hitch in her right leg that she was clearly trying not to show. She stopped at the edge of the boulder cluster and looked at them all with eyes that had the particular quality of someone who had been alone for a very long time. Captain, she said. Welcome to the worst position in Ravenfall Ridge, Cole said. Have a seat. She didn't sit. She stood and looked at the terrain sketch Webb had drawn in the snow, and something shifted in her expression. Not quite surprise, but a recalibration. Your sergeant thinks tactically, she said. 22 years of practice, Webb said without looking up. She studied the sketch another moment. Your southern choke point is correct, but you've underestimated the width of the eastern approach. The satellite imagery makes it look narrower than it is. The enemy can push a squad through it abreast, which changes your fire distribution. Webb looked at her, then at the sketch. Then he redrew the eastern approach line. Appreciate that, he said. Cole watched the exchange and felt something in his chest that was partly tactical relief and partly something harder to name. You going to tell me your name? She looked at him. In the low red light from Diaz's headlamp, he could see she was in her mid-30s, maybe younger, with the kind of face that had been outside in hard weather for a long time. There was a cut along her jawline, recent, maybe from rock fragment, and her right hand, when she finally rested it on a boulder, was trembling slightly in a way she wasn't controlling. Voss, she said. Commander Lena Voss. Commander, Navy? Joint Program. She paused. Shadow Watch. Cole had heard the name once, 3 years ago, from a general who'd said it the way you said the name of a project you weren't supposed to know existed. He'd filed it away and not thought about it since. Reconnaissance, he said. Yes. Observe and report. Yes. Not direct action. Correct. So those 2 shots were a violation of my standing orders. She said it flatly. No apology in it. No performance of regret. Just fact. I'm aware. Cole looked at her for a moment. Why? She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the terrain sketch again, at the rough lines Webb had drawn that represented a battlefield where 12 men were trying not to die. When she spoke, her voice had the quality of something that had been decided a long time ago and was only now being said out loud. Because I watched your man on the south slope get flanked, and I had the shot, and I took it, she said. And because I'm done letting people die when I have the capability to stop it. Silence in the boulder cluster. Even Diaz had stopped working, gloved hands still on Singh's leg, listening. Petrov, Cole said. Voss met his eyes. He was on the south slope before I had eyes on the flanking element. I'm sorry. I saw him go down before I could... She stopped. I'm sorry. Cole nodded. One short movement. All right. What's your read on the mortar? She took a breath that was also a reset. He could see her doing it, switching registers, going from the personal back to the tactical, the way experienced soldiers did when they needed to function. She moved to the edge of the overhang and looked south, then crouched, slowly, favoring the right leg, and picked up Webb's drawing stick. The mortar team will set up at the Southern Valley entrance here. She drew a mark. Range to our position is approximately 800 meters. They'll bracket first, 2 or 3 rounds to find us, then fire for effect. She drew the likely fall of shot pattern. We have maybe 8 minutes from first round to the bracket being complete. So we need to be somewhere else, Webb said. Or the mortar team needs to be somewhere else, Voss said. You said your ammunition was sufficient, Cole said. What does sufficient mean exactly? She looked at him, then, 3 rounds. 3 rounds, with a mortar team setting up 800 meters away and 80 fighters about to push north. Okay, Cole said. Here's what I'm thinking. The plan was not elegant. Elegant plans required resources and time, and they had neither. What they had was a sniper with 3 rounds, 11 functional rifles, 2 wounded men who could still fire from a fixed position, and terrain that the enemy didn't fully know because their commander, the man who'd spent time on this ridge, was dead. Cole laid it out fast. Voss listened and corrected twice, once on a distance estimate, once on the timing of the enemy's likely push. Both corrections were right. Cole could see it immediately when she pointed to the terrain. She had been on this ridge long enough to know it the way you knew a room you'd lived in for years. Iron Fang Pass, she said, pointing southwest to where the valley walls narrowed to a slot maybe 40 meters wide. If we can get there ahead of their advance, we have a defensible position that eliminates their numbers advantage. They can't bring 80 fighters to bear through a 40-meter gap. Getting there means crossing open ground, Webb said. 200 meters of it. East side has a dead ground corridor. The ridge shadow holds until about 0330, which is, she checked the sky, 23 minutes. 23 minutes to move 2 wounded men 200 meters across terrain we don't know in the dark. I know it, Voss said. Webb looked at Cole. Cole looked at Voss. Lead us, Cole said. What? She led them. She moved with the right leg injury in a way that was almost invisible. A slight compensation in her stride, a fractional adjustment in how she placed her foot on downslopes. But Cole was watching, and he could see it. He put Hayes directly behind her so Hayes could catch her if the leg gave out, and he put himself and Webb at the back of the column with Singh between them. The dead ground corridor was exactly where she said it would be. 23 minutes became 19. She moved faster than he'd expected, fast enough that the team had to push to keep interval, Singh breathing through his teeth with the effort of keeping up. They were 15 meters from the entrance to Iron Fang Pass when the first mortar round came in. It hit 200 meters south, the bracket, the ranging shot, exactly as Voss had predicted. The sound was enormous in the mountain silence, a crack thump that echoed off every rock face simultaneously and made the distance impossible to judge by ear alone. Move, Voss said, and she was running. They all ran. The pass was 40 meters wide at the entrance, narrowing to 25 inside, with walls that rose 60 meters on either side. Sheer granite, no footholds, no way to descend. The floor was frozen scree and patches of ice, and Cole felt his boots sliding twice in the first 100 meters. Around him, the team was breathing hard, feet hitting the scree with a sound like broken glass. The second mortar round came in as they cleared the entrance. Closer, maybe 150 meters south. The bracket was tightening. "Here," Voss said, stopping at a point where the pass widened slightly into a natural alcove on the left side. "Defensive position. You have cover, you have the choke point," and she pointed up. "The walls will deflect mortar rounds. They'd need to hit the pass entrance directly, and at this angle, they can't." Cole put the team into position fast, the way you placed pieces on a board when the clock was running. 2 riflemen on the right wall behind a natural rock shelf. 2 more on the left. The wounded Singh and Okafor in the alcove where they could fire without moving. Webb took the center. "Last 3 rounds," Cole said to Voss. "Talk me through how you're using them." She had already pulled the lapua off her back and was settling into a position behind a low boulder at the pass entrance, setting up to cover the 200 meters of open ground they'd just crossed. "Mortar team first," she said. "1 round. If I can see the crew, which I should be able to from here." She was settling her breathing even as she spoke, the way shooters did, writing it down. "Then, depending on what their advance looks like, I'll hold the other 2 for the push." "For the push," Cole said. "Meaning?" "Meaning when they stack fighters at the pass entrance, there will be a moment when their concentration is highest. 2 rounds into that concentration will do more damage than 10 scattered shots." She said it with complete clinical detachment, the way a surgeon described a procedure. Cole had met snipers who performed that detachment as a kind of armor, a way of not feeling what the work actually was. He didn't think that was what this was. He thought she'd just had a very long time to make peace with what she was capable of. "Lena," Cole said. She looked up from the scope. "That leg," he said. "How bad?" A pause. "It'll hold." "That's not what I asked." She looked at him for a moment. That recalibrating look again, the look of someone not accustomed to being asked direct questions about herself. "Fragment. 2 days ago. It's been worse." "Diaz." Cole looked at his med. 2 minutes. "Sir, the advance is going to Diaz. 2 minutes." Diaz moved to Voss with her kit, and Voss submitted to it with the particular stiffness of someone accepting help they weren't sure they deserved, holding her position behind the boulder while Diaz worked around the ghillie suit with practiced hands. "You're going to need to get that properly cleaned," Diaz said quietly. "I know." 2 days in a mountain environment with an open fragment wound. "I know," Voss said again. Not dismissive, just, "I know. I made the calculation. I'm still here." Diaz finished, taped, and moved back to Singh. Cole settled in beside Voss, looking down the pass toward the open ground. In the distance, at the southern valley entrance, he could see movement, the enemy advance, organizing, pushing north. And further south, at the edge of visibility, a cluster of figures around a tube shape that caught no light at all. "Mortar team," he said. "I see them." A breath. 760 meters. Wind is low, maybe 3 knots northeast, actually favorable. She was still, the way the mountain was still. "I'm going to take this shot now, Captain." "Take it," Cole said. The lapua fired. The sound rolled out and back again off the granite walls, and at 760 meters, the mortar crew stopped moving in a way that meant one of them was down, and the others had just realized they were within range of something they could not see. The tube did not fire. In the confusion that followed, Cole watched through his binoculars. The mortar crew broke from their position and moved for cover, and in moving they abandoned the tube, and the tube stayed where it was. "Good shot," Cole said. "It was a necessary shot," Voss said, and reloaded. Down the valley, the advance had started. 80 fighters, moving north through the dead ground corridor that Raptor team had crossed 11 minutes ago, coming toward Iron Fang Pass in a column that compressed as the terrain narrowed. Cole watched them come and did the math in his head, ranges, angles, ammunition states, and understood exactly how tight this was going to be. Webb moved up beside him. "They're good," Webb said quietly. "Look at their spacing. They're not bunching." No. The enemy fighters were maintaining tactical intervals even in the approach, not making the amateur mistake of crowding. Whoever was running the advance now, it wasn't nobody. They've done this before. So have we. Cole looked at his team. The 9 riflemen in position, the 2 wounded men with their weapons up, the woman beside him with 2 rounds left in a rifle that had already changed this fight twice. All of them waiting in the cold and the dark, in a granite slot in a mountain that would never know their names. "Raptor, stand by," Cole said into the radio. His voice came out even, which was what he wanted. "Controlled pairs, fire on my call. We hold this pass." Acknowledgement clicks down the line. The enemy came on. At 150 meters, the pass entrance funneled them. The terrain did exactly what Voss said it would do, compressing the advance from a wide formation into a narrowing column, stacking the fighters behind the leaders in a way that eliminated their numbers advantage and turned 80 men into something that could only come at you 12 wide. At 100 meters, Cole saw the moment Voss had described. The highest concentration, the stack, the brief window when the geometry of the terrain worked against the attackers. She fired. Then the second round. And Cole said now into the radio, Raptor team opened up in the confined space of Iron Fang Pass, and the granite walls turned the sound into something physical, a compression wave of noise that Cole felt in his teeth. The enemy advance hit the fire and came apart, not broke, not ran, but staggered and compressed and lost cohesion in the narrow space. And in that lost cohesion was the gap that Cole had been looking for. 12 rifles. 2 men who could barely stand. 3 rounds from a sniper who was supposed to be an observer. It was, Cole would think later, just barely enough. But the enemy was still coming, and Voss had fired her last round. And in the sudden silence after the echo of the Lapua died away, she turned and looked at Cole with an expression that said, I'm empty. Whatever comes next, I'm fighting it with my hands. Cole pulled his sidearm and put it on the boulder in front of her without a word. She looked at the pistol, then at him. Keep shooting, he said, and went back to his rifle. Behind them, deep in the pass, Singh said something through his teeth. Not a word, just a sound. And Diaz was there immediately, and the fight went on, and the mountain absorbed everything and gave nothing back. The pistol was a Sig Sauer P320, standard issue, and Voss shot it the way she shot everything else. Without wasted motion, without drama, with the particular economy of someone for whom a firearm was a tool, the same way a hammer was a tool. She put 4 rounds downrange in the time it took Cole to empty half a magazine, and 3 of those 4 found targets, which was not what you expected from a pistol at 60 meters in the dark. But Voss apparently didn't operate inside normal expectation brackets. The enemy advance stalled at the pass entrance. Not broke, stalled. There was a difference, and Cole knew it. They were taking cover, reassessing, which meant whoever was running the push now was smart enough to recognize that a frontal assault through a 40-meter gap against a fixed defensive position was a way to spend men without buying ground. They'd probe, find the edges, look for the angle. Cole kept that in mind while he kept shooting. The fight at Iron Fang Pass lasted 19 minutes by Webb's watch. Cole didn't time it himself. He was too busy working the problem. But Webb had a habit of marking duration on every engagement, written in pencil on the inside of his wrist. 19 minutes. It felt like 2 hours, and it felt like 5 minutes simultaneously, the way combat always did, time doing something nonlinear that Cole had never found adequate words for. When the enemy pulled back, a fighting withdrawal, disciplined, covering each other's movement, Cole called ceasefire and the pass went quiet. The quiet was enormous. The team breathed. Diaz moved immediately, not waiting, going down the line the way she always did after a firefight, touching shoulders, checking faces, finding the wounds that men didn't report because they were still running on adrenaline and didn't know yet they were hit. She found 2, Hayes with a graze along his right forearm that he genuinely hadn't noticed, and a younger soldier named Reyes who had taken a fragment in the thigh that was bleeding steadily and required immediate attention. Sit down, Reyes, Diaz said. I'm fine, Doc. Sit. Down. Reyes sat. Cole did his own assessment, walking the position, counting. Everyone present, nobody lost in the pass, which felt like more than they deserved given the arithmetic of the last 20 minutes. He came back to the entrance boulder where Voss was still sitting, the Sig resting across her knee, her right leg extended at an angle that suggested the fragment wound was talking to her now that the adrenaline was stepping back. He crouched beside her. Leg. It's fine. You said that before. It's still fine. You're holding it straight because bending it hurts. She looked at him with an expression that was not quite irritation and not quite amusement, and landed somewhere in between. You're observant. It's a job requirement. He sat down beside her with his back against the boulder, because his own knees were informing him that he was 39 years old and had just run 200 meters across frozen scree and fought for 19 minutes at altitude, and they would like some acknowledgement of that fact. How long have you been on this ridge? 17 days. Cole let that sit for a moment. 17 days alone at altitude in winter, operating in observation posture, no support, no extract. Shadowwatch inserted you solo? Shadowwatch inserted me with a two-man support element, she said. They were pulled out on day 4. Mission parameters changed, apparently. But not your parameters. My orders were to maintain observation until further notice. And further notice never came. Something like that. She looked down the pass, watching the dark. Command decided the site was lower priority than initially assessed. They were going to pull the operation entirely. A pause. Then your team showed up. Cole thought about that. About the fact that his mission had been launched off intelligence that included moderate confidence and a classified observation program that had apparently been watching the site for 2.5 weeks. He thought about what it meant that those two things hadn't been connected in any briefing document he'd seen. You knew we were coming, he said. I picked up your insertion birds 12 hours before you arrived. 2 Blackhawks, approach vector from the northwest, which is the standard insertion corridor for this range. She said it without accusation. I tried to signal my handler, no response. I tried twice more. Still nothing. Your handler went dark. My handler went dark. Another pause. So I watched you walk in. I watched the ambush set up around you. They had people moving into position for 6 hours before you arrived. Pre-planned. Someone knew you were coming. The words landed in the cold air and stayed there. Cole said nothing for a moment. He looked at Webb, who was 8 meters away and hadn't appeared to be listening, but absolutely was, because that was Webb's particular skill. The ability to absorb information from across a room while appearing entirely focused on something else. Webb was looking at the terrain sketch he'd updated in the snow, but Cole could see the set of his shoulders. You're saying we were sold, Cole said. I'm saying the ambush was positioned and timed with a precision that doesn't happen accidentally. She kept her voice level. Beyond that, I'm just a reconnaissance officer who's been alone on a mountain for 17 days, so take my read for what it's worth. Your read got us through that pass, Cole said. I'll take it. She looked at him briefly, and something moved behind her eyes. Something she didn't let reach her face, but that was there for a fraction of a second, like a door that opened and closed before you could see what was on the other side. They needed to move before first light. That was the constraint around which everything else organized itself. Daylight on an open mountain with no air support and a hostile force of 50+ would reduce their options to approximately 0, and Cole had not run out of options yet. He gathered the team in the alcove, keeping his voice low even though the enemy had pulled back to a distance where volume was unlikely to matter. Old habit. Exfil North is still our best route, but we have to assume they've repositioned to cover it, he said. Voss, what's the northern ridge look like? She was standing with her weight on her left leg, the lapua back on her shoulder, the SIG in her right hand. She'd reloaded the SIG from a magazine Cole hadn't seen her produce. She'd had it somewhere in the ghillie suit, tucked into a place that spoke of long practice at knowing what you needed and where to keep it. The northern ridge has 2 viable descent routes, she said. The primary, which your mission brief showed you, is covered. I watched them move a blocking element there during the pass engagement, probably 8 to 12 fighters. The secondary route is a gully system on the northeast face. It's not on standard imagery because it runs under a rock shelf that looks solid from above. You've used it, Cole said. I've used it. Webb looked up from the sketch. How bad is the terrain? Technical in 2 spots. Rope work on the first section. There's a 7-meter drop that requires a descent line. She looked at the team. Your wounded won't enjoy it. From his position against the wall, Singh said, I'll manage. His voice was tight but steady. You'll need help, Voss said. Not cruelly, just accurately. Then somebody helps me. Singh looked at nobody in particular. I'm not staying here. Nobody argued with that. We have enough line? Cole asked Webb. Brought 30 meters of spectra, should cover it. All right. Cole looked at the team, did the read, fatigue levels, Ammunition states, the particular quality of alertness in each face that told him who was running close to their limit and who had reserve left. Okafor was running on fumes. The arm wound and the blood loss had taken more out of him than he was showing, and his eyes had the slightly unfocused quality of someone fighting harder than their body wanted to. Reyes was fresh bandaged and moving carefully. The others were tired in the normal way, the way that didn't matter yet. 2 hours until first light, Cole said. We move in 10 minutes. Voss leads. Webb and I carry Singh. Diaz stays close to Okafor. He looked at each of them. We've had worse nights. When? Okafor said, and several people almost smiled, which was the point, and they started moving. The northeast gully was everything Voss had said it was, and a few things she hadn't mentioned, presumably because she'd assessed them as non-critical, and she was right about that. But it would have been nice to know in advance about the section of ice over rock that came before the 7-meter drop and required everyone to cross it on their hands and knees, because the footing on 2 legs was impossible. Cole went across it on his hands and knees with his rifle across his back, and the dignity of the moment not particularly concerning him, because dignity was a peacetime consideration and they weren't in peacetime. He made it across, turned, and helped Webb get Singh to the drop point. Singh went down on the spectra line with Hayes belaying and his jaw set so hard Cole could see the muscle working from 3 meters away. Voss had gone first, establishing the anchor point for the line with a speed and confidence that suggested she'd rigged this exact anchor before, which she probably had. She was waiting at the bottom when Cole came down, already scanning the terrain below. A dark slope of loose scree that ran north for maybe 400 meters before hitting tree line. And tree line meant cover and cover was the goal. Cole landed beside her. You rigged this anchor coming up. Yes. Planning for extraction from the start. It's useful to know your exits, she said, even when you're told there's only one. Cole looked at her. In the very early gray that was beginning, barely beginning, to separate the sky from the mountain, he could see her face more clearly than he had in the dark. She had the look of someone who had been self-sufficient for so long that the presence of other people around her was something she was actively processing, like a new variable in a calculation she'd been running solo. Who was your handler? Cole asked. A pause. His name was Devereaux. Major Alan Devereaux, JSOC liaison. Cole filed the name. And you haven't been able to reach him in 17 days. 13 days. The first 4 he was responsive. What changed on day 5? She looked at him with an expression that said she'd been asking herself that question for 13 days. I don't know. His channel went to automated responses, then to nothing. The automated responses stopped on day 9. The last of the team was coming down the line. Cole watched them land and move clear. Diaz catching Okafor's elbow when he stumbled on the scree. Okafor pulling his arm back with a reflex that had nothing to do with Diaz and everything to do with the automatic resistance to being seen as needing help. Devereaux, Cole said again. I'm going to want to look into that. You and me both, Voss said, and started down the scree slope. They hit the tree line as the sky went from dark gray to light gray, the particular threshold where shapes became identifiable and the tactical calculus shifted from sound-based to sight-based. Spruce and fire, dense and low-branched, the kind of alpine forest that was dark inside even at noon. They pushed into it and Cole felt the team breathe collectively. The psychological relief of cover above and beside them. The sense of being less visible, less exposed, even if the forest also degraded their own sight lines. He called a halt at a natural depression in the ground, a low bowl ringed by spruce trunks, and got the team into it and set 2 men on watch and let the others rest. Rest was the wrong word. They sat, which was different from rest, and ate what they had, which was not much, and drank water from the melted snow bottles that Diaz had been maintaining, and nobody talked very much. The particular silence after a fight when the body was still running chemistry that the brain hadn't caught up to yet. Voss sat apart from the group by about 2 meters. Not far, not close. The precise distance of someone who wasn't accustomed to proximity and was navigating it in real time. Cole noticed and let it be. Webb came and sat next to Cole and said nothing for a while, which meant he had something to say and was picking his words, which meant it was something complicated. She's good, Webb said finally. Yeah. Shadow Watch. Webb kept his voice low. I looked into that program once, about 3 years back. Heard the name in a debrief. Tried to find documentation. Find any? Nothing. Not a budget line, not a personnel file, not a training record. He paused. Which is either because it doesn't exist or because it's buried deeper than I know how to dig. She's real, Cole said. Those shots were real. I know, I'm just saying, whatever she is, whatever this program is, someone worked very hard to make it disappear on paper. Webb looked across the bowl at Voss, who was checking the Lapua's action with the automatic attention of a person maintaining a thing they depended on. And now she's sitting in a forest with us, which is not where a disappeared person is supposed to end up. No, Cole agreed. The cell, Webb said. If somebody sold us, and I think you're right that somebody sold us, they knew our frequencies, our insertion window, our approach corridor. That's not signals intelligence. That's internal. Cole looked at the forest around them. The light was building, filtering through the canopy and the watery gray way of winter mornings at altitude. I know. So we're careful about who we contact when we get extract. We're careful about everything, Cole said. Start with that. Webb nodded and went back to watching his sector. Oh, the radio came back at 0614. Not the long-range set. That was still jammed. The jamming signal had followed them north in a way that confirmed it was active and directional, which meant someone was running a jammer on a vehicle that was also moving north, tracking them. The tight beam short-range set came back, which was useful only for team internal comms, but the fact of it coming back was information in itself. Cole keyed it and listened. What he got was not static. What he got was a burst transmission, encoded, cycling through 3 frequencies in a pattern he recognized as emergency beacon protocol. Someone was broadcasting on the emergency net. He pulled Voss over. You recognize this pattern? She listened for 4 seconds. Her expression changed in a way Cole couldn't fully read. That's a Shadow Watch emergency channel. The cycling pattern is a specific code. She took the handset, listened again. It's a retrieval signal. For you? For any Shadow Watch asset in the operational area. She handed the handset back. It means program security has been breached and assets are to go to emergency extraction protocols. Meaning someone knows you're here. Meaning someone knows the program is compromised. She said it carefully. Whether they know my specific position is a different question. But someone activated the retrieval signal. Yes. Who has authority to do that? 2 people. The program director, Colonel Hargrove, and the JSOC liaison. She paused. Devereaux. Cole looked at her. Devereaux, who went dark 13 days ago. Yes. And now Devereaux, or someone using Devereaux's channel, is broadcasting emergency retrieval. The silence between them had a texture to it. You think it's a trap, Voss said. Not a question. I think I don't know what it is, Cole said. And not knowing is reason enough to be careful. He looked at the handset. Does the retrieval signal have a response protocol? Authentication code. I transmit it, and the extraction team gives me a countercode. And if the countercode is wrong, then whoever is offering extraction is not who they say they are. Cole thought for a moment. Do it. Transmit the authentication. She looked at him. If it's a trap, it confirms our position. They already know roughly where we are. They're running a directional jammer on us. Transmitting gives them a more precise fix, but it also gives us information. If the countercode is wrong, we know we're dealing with someone running an operation against both of us. He kept his voice level. And that changes what we do next. Voss was quiet for a moment. Then she took the handset and transmitted. The response came back in 11 seconds. 11 seconds was fast, faster than a legitimate extraction team running authentication through proper channels, which required verification at multiple levels and typically took 3 to 4 minutes. She listened to the countercode. Her face went very still. Wrong, she said. Cole took the handset back. He looked at Webb, who had come over during the exchange and was listening with the expression of a man adding numbers that he didn't like the sum of. Options, Cole said to the general air. We go dark, Webb said immediately. Cut all transmission, move east, try to get enough distance from the jammer that we can hit the satellite emergency net. East takes us back toward the valley, Voss said. Not if we angle northeast along the ridgeline. There's a comms window. Satellite pass at 0720, which is, Webb checked his wrist. 62 minutes. If we can get clear of the jamming radius, we get one transmission window. To who? Voss asked. If someone inside JSOC sold this mission, who do you trust on the other end of that transmission? The question sat there. It was a good question. It was the kind of question that didn't have a comfortable answer. There are people I trust, Cole said. Personally. Outside the chain of command on this operation. He meant it as a statement of fact rather than a reassurance. One in particular. And you're confident that trust is placed correctly. Cole thought of Brigadier General Ruth Calloway, who had been his battalion commander 8 years ago and had made a point since then of staying exactly 1 degree removed from whatever operation Cole was running, which was her way of maintaining deniability while maintaining contact, and who had given him a personal frequency 2 years ago with instructions to use it only when he had run out of better options. Yeah, he said, I'm confident. Voss looked at him for another moment. Then she nodded, once the way she did everything, without excess, without performance. Then let's move. Moving northeast along the ridgeline with 11 people, 2 of them wounded, trying to stay inside tree line and also make time, was an exercise in competing priorities. Speed exposed them, cover slowed them. The compromise was movement in short bounds, 50 meters, halt, assess, move again, which was how you survived in terrain where the enemy might be anywhere and where you couldn't afford to find out the hard way. Voss was on point. Cole had offered her the position without discussion, partly because she knew the terrain and partly because he'd watched her move in the dark and understood that she was better at this particular thing than anyone on his team. She moved with a carefulness that was different from Okafor's hunting country instinct. It was more systematic, built from a different kind of training, one that was about sustained concealment over time rather than quick tactical movement. She read the ground differently. She paused at different points, looked at different things, made different calculations. Hayes fell in beside Cole during one of the halts and said quietly, She trained for this specific range, didn't she? She knows every meter of it. 17 days, Cole said. Yeah, but more than that, the way she moves through it. That's not 17 days of field familiarity. Hayes watched her at the tree line edge, scanning before signaling the advance. That's pre-mission preparation. Map study, satellite review, probably terrain models. Somebody planned this very carefully before they put her up here. And then pulled the support out from under her, Cole said. Hayes was quiet for a moment. That's a hell of a thing to do to someone. Cole didn't answer because there wasn't a useful answer and the signal to advance had come. They were 40 minutes into the northeast push when Okafor went down. Not shot. His legs simply stopped working the way legs worked. The blood loss and the altitude and the sustained exertion finally adding up to a number his body wouldn't accept. He went to one knee first, then his left arm gave, and he put his rifle in the snow and grabbed a spruce trunk with his right hand and held on to it while the world apparently did something complicated around him. Diaz was there in seconds. Okafor. She put 2 fingers on his neck. His pulse was running fast and thin, the profile of someone in early hypovolemic shock. Talk to me. I'm good, Okafor said. You're not good. You need a hospital, Diaz said. What you're getting is my kit, and you're going to sit there and let me work, and you're going to stop telling me you're fine. Okafor leaned his head against the spruce trunk and didn't argue, which was itself diagnostic of how bad he felt. Cole crouched beside them and looked at Diaz. She looked back at him with the face of someone delivering news she would have preferred not to deliver. He needs fluids. I have 1 bag of saline left. It'll buy us time, but not much. Cole gave her the time. He put the team into a perimeter, watched the forest, listened. The mountain was quiet around them. No movement, no sound beyond wind in the spruce crowns and the far-off call of something bird-like that Voss would probably have been able to identify. Voss had come back from the point position and was standing at the edge of the perimeter, watching Cole work through the problem, not offering and not staying silent either. A middle position, available, but not presuming. How far to the satellite comms window? She asked. Webb, Cole said. Webb checked the sketch he'd made of the approach route. Maybe 2 kilometers northeast. If we're past the jammer radius by then, we can hit the 0720 window. Voss looked at Okafor, who had Diaz's IV line in his good arm and was looking at the sky with the detached expression of a man managing pain by going somewhere else in his head. She looked at the terrain ahead, the slope, the density of cover, the light that was building now to something that was real morning and not just the absence of night. "I can move faster alone," she said. Cole looked up. "If I take a radio and go ahead, I can reach the comms window, transmit your authentication, and have extract coordinates back to you before your team has to move Okafor." She said it straight, no angling in it. "You stay with your men. I go ahead." "Alone," Cole said. "I've been alone for 17 days. "You've been alone on a ridge with a fixed observation post. This is different. You'd be moving through terrain we haven't cleared with an unknown hostile force somewhere between here and the comms point, on a leg that's been running on adrenaline for the last 3 hours." "Yes," she said, "all of that." Cole looked at her. She looked back at him with the particular steadiness of someone who had already calculated the risks and made the decision and was now presenting it to him as a courtesy rather than a request. "What's your alternate route if the direct line to the comms point is covered?" he asked. Without hesitation, "Northeast along the 600-meter contour, drop to the saddle between the 2nd and 3rd summit ridges. Approach the comms point from the north, where the terrain gives dead ground coverage from the valley." She paused. "It adds 12 minutes. She had it in her head, all of it. The terrain she'd been living in for 17 days, mapped to a level of detail that nobody without satellite imagery and weeks of study could carry. Cole made the call. "Take Webb's radio. Primary frequency is channel 6, emergency is channel 9. Calloway's personal frequency." He pulled a small card from his left breast pocket and held it out. It was handwritten. He'd memorized the number long ago, but kept the card the way you kept a backup to a backup. "Is on there." She took the card without looking at it, tucked it into the ghillie suit. "Authentication phrase for Calloway is November Kite," Cole said. "She'll know what it means." Voss nodded. "One more thing," Cole said. She waited. "You come back." She looked at him with that expression again, the door that opened and closed. Something moved behind her eyes, quiet and complicated, and she held his look for 2 seconds longer than was strictly tactical, and then she turned and moved north through the trees, and the forest took her, and she was gone. Webb came to stand beside Cole. They both looked at the empty space between the spruce trunks where she'd been. "You trust her," Webb said. "I trust her read," Cole said, "and I trust her capability." He paused. "The rest I don't know yet." "That's an honest answer." "It's the only one I've got." He went back to Okafor, who was looking at the saline bag hanging from a spruce branch, and said, without looking down, "She's going to be all right, sir." Cole looked at him. "She moves like she knows how to take care of herself," Okafor said. His voice was tired but clear. "I watched her in the past. That's not someone who takes risks she hasn't thought through." He closed his eyes. "She'll come back." Cole didn't answer. Above the forest, the sky was full winter morning now, pale and flat and very cold, the kind of sky that gave nothing away about what was coming next. Somewhere to the northeast, a woman with 3 rounds spent, a fragment wound, and 17 days of mountain in her was moving through terrain she knew better than anyone should, carrying a radio that might or might not reach a general who might or might not be able to help them. Cole checked his watch. 0641. 39 minutes to the satellite window. He settled his back against a spruce trunk, found his rifle, and watched the forest. At 0658, the forest to the northeast produced a sound that didn't belong to it. Cole heard it before he consciously identified it. A shift in the quality of silence, the specific absence of the small sounds that forests made when nothing was moving through them. He was on his feet before the thought finished forming, rifle up, moving to the northeast edge of the perimeter without making noise about it. Webb was already there. They stood and listened together. Wind in the spruce crowns. The creek somewhere below them, running under ice. And beneath those things, distant but rhythmic, the sound of boots on frozen ground moving through timber with the controlled urgency of someone who was moving fast, but trying not to make noise and not entirely succeeding. Cole held the rifle at low ready and waited. Voss came through the tree line at a pace that was almost a run, controlled on the downslope, her right leg taking the impact with a hitch. She was too tired to hide anymore. She was carrying the radio in her left hand, and her face had an expression that Cole hadn't seen on it before. Not fear exactly, but the tightly managed version of it that experienced people wore when the situation had moved into territory they hadn't fully planned for. She came directly to Cole. "Window worked," she said. "I reached Calloway." And? And Calloway is aware of the mission, aware of the ambush, and aware of Devereaux. She caught her breath. One controlled inhale, one exhale. Devereaux is dead. He's been dead for 11 days. The number landed in Cole's chest and stayed there. 11 days, he said. Found in his quarters at Bragg. Ruled a cardiac event. No investigation initiated. She kept her voice level, but her jaw was tight. Calloway says the ruling was accepted at command level in under 6 hours, which is not how a cardiac event investigation moves. Webb said, very quietly, "Someone covered it fast." "Yes." Voss looked at Cole. "Calloway is putting a QRF in the air. She's routing it through a parallel command channel, nothing touching the original operation chain." She said, a pause, like she was deciding whether to say the next part. "She said to tell you that you were right about the word moderate." Cole looked at her. "She said you'd know what that meant," Voss said. He did. It meant Calloway had seen the original brief. It meant Calloway had flagged the intelligence confidence rating and been overridden by someone above her. It meant this had been visible to people with authority, and those people had made choices. He filed all of that in a part of his mind marked later, because later was when they'd be alive enough to matter. "Extract timeline," he said. She said 90 minutes, maybe less. "She's pulling from Kessler forward, which is 60 kilometers, Cole said. "I know Kessler." He turned to Webb. 90 minutes. "Okafor can hold 90 minutes, Webb said, which was the diplomatic version of Okafor might hold 90 minutes. "He'll hold," Diaz said from behind them, and there was a quality in her voice that discouraged debate. Cole turned back to Voss. "What else?" "You came back faster than the timeline should have allowed. Something happened." She looked at him for a half second with something like surprise, like she hadn't expected him to notice the timing. There were 2 fighters on the northeast contour, between the comms point and here. "You went through them." "Around the first. I didn't have a choice with the second." Cole looked at her hands. Her right hand had blood on the knuckle of the index finger, dried, the small specific mark of a close-range encounter that had not involved the rifle. "He's down?" "He won't be calling anyone," she said. No elaboration. Cole didn't ask for any. "They're pushing the perimeter north," he said. "They know we're in this section of forest. They're running a sweep." He looked at the team's position, the natural bowl, the tree line angles. "We can't stay here for 90 minutes. "No," Voss agreed. "What's the best ground between here and the extract window? Defensible? Cover? Somewhere a QRF bird can put down." She was already thinking. He could see it, the way her eyes went slightly unfocused in the direction of a calculation. "There's a logging plateau 2 kilometers north-northeast. Old road cut, mostly overgrown, but it's flat enough for a helicopter, and the tree line on 3 sides gives covered approach from the south." She paused. "It's exposed from the north, but if the QRF is coming from Kessler, they'll be coming from the north, so that's acceptable. How defensible while we wait? The road cut has a raised berm on the south side. Equipment spoil pushed up when they cleared the timber. 2 meters high, 40 meters long. It's not a fighting position, but it's better than open ground. 2 kilometers, Webb said, with Okafor." "We can do 2 kilometers, Cole said. "Okafor." He raised his voice slightly, not loud. "You're going to walk out of this forest." From against the spruce trunk, Okafor's voice came back. "I was going to walk out regardless, sir. Nice of you to make it official." They moved. The formation was modified for the terrain and the casualties, Voss on point as before, then the main body, Cole and Hayes flanking Singh, who was moving under his own power now, jaw set and gait uneven, the leg wound tightening in the cold the way wounds did. Okafor walked between Reyes and a soldier named Gutierrez, who were technically providing tactical cover in the adjacent sectors, and technically also catching Okafor's elbow every time the slope changed angle, and his equilibrium made promises his legs couldn't keep. Diaz walked rear, which put her in the most exposed position, and which she had simply taken without anyone assigning it, because that was how Diaz operated. The sweep they'd anticipated came at 0724. Cole heard it first, the pattern of movement, too coordinated to be wildlife, coming from the southwest through the heavy timber. Voss heard it maybe 3 seconds later. He saw her hand come up, fist, halt, and the whole team went still. 30 seconds. Cole counted. The enemy sweep was moving through the timber in an extended line, the way you covered ground when you were looking for people who might be anywhere. They were moving northeast, which was toward the team's current position, but angled. They'd passed north of the bowl the team had rested in, which was the right call if you were sweeping blind, but it meant the intercept point was ahead rather than behind. Cole made the calculation in approximately 4 seconds. Staying still meant the sweep line would pass within maybe 60 meters of their current position. Moving meant noise. Either option had a probability of contact. He looked at Voss. She was looking at him. She'd done the same calculation and arrived at the same place. He pointed left. She shook her head fractionally and pointed right, then held up 2 fingers and pointed at the ground. 2 fighters, stationary, covering the right side. He looked right. He couldn't see them, but he accepted the correction and pointed left again, committing. They moved left, around the sweep line's northern edge, in the specific kind of silence that only happened when 11 people were collectively terrified of making sound. Cole moved last, covering the rear, watching the timber to the southwest for the shapes that would resolve into soldiers if the sweep line adjusted. It didn't adjust. The sweep passed behind them by 40 meters. Cole could see figures moving through the trees, dark shapes in pale morning light, and he pressed himself against a spruce trunk and didn't breathe and watched them pass. And then they were past, and the team was on the northwest side of the sweep and moving again. When they were clear, when the sounds of the sweep had faded south, Cole felt the specific exhaustion of sustained tension releasing, which was its own kind of drain. He rolled his neck and kept moving. Voss dropped back to his position during the next bound. She moved beside him for 30 meters without speaking, which was a change from her usual point discipline. "The 2 fighters on the right," she said quietly. They were set up at a gap in the timber that looked like natural cover. They were placed there. Someone who knows this forest put them there. "Someone who knows this forest," Cole said. "The sweep is moving with local knowledge. They're not guessing the terrain. They're using it." She paused. "This isn't the same group from the valley. The fighters from the valley know the valley. These are different." Cole thought about that while his boots found purchase on a frozen slope. A second element. One that knew the northern ridgeline the way Voss knew it, from study, from preparation. Brought in specifically for the northern push, yes, which means someone planned for the possibility that you'd break through the valley ambush. She kept her voice completely flat. This wasn't a contingency. This was the plan. "Drive us north," Cole said, "into prepared ground." "Yes." "And we've been moving north this whole time." "Yes," she said again. Cole stopped walking. Not because he decided to stop, his legs just paused, the way a processor paused when it got input that changed the parameters of the problem it was running. He stood in the timber and looked north and thought about it. Webb materialized at his elbow. "You're thinking we're being channeled." "We are being channeled," Cole said. "The valley ambush pushed us north. The jammer is mobile and has been staying north of us. The sweep just now was moving northeast, pushing us further north." He looked at the route ahead. "The logging plateau." Voss said nothing. "Is the logging plateau the obvious extraction point?" Cole said. "Or is it the obvious extraction point because someone with knowledge of this terrain decided it was the obvious extraction point and we'd arrive at it on our own?" The silence that followed was a particular kind of silence. "It's the best ground," Voss said carefully. "I gave you the best ground because it is the best ground." "I know," Cole said. "And if someone else also knows it's the best ground, then it's a kill zone wearing the face of an LZ," Webb said. Nobody spoke for a moment. The wind moved through the spruce crowns above them in a sound that could have been anything. "Callaway's QRF is real," Cole said. "I trust that." "I'm not saying it isn't," Webb said, "but if the parallel channel Callaway used to organize it isn't as clean as she thinks, then whoever sold the mission knows a QRF is coming," Cole said, "and knows roughly where we're headed." He rubbed his face with one gloved hand, a gesture of fatigue that he allowed himself because nobody was watching the emotional management right now. They were all too busy surviving. "We need to change the extract point. If we change it, we need to communicate the change to Callaway," Voss said, "which means another transmission, which means another exposure window." Yes. And we don't know if we can reach the satellite channel again before the QRF is already in the air with the original coordinates. No, Voss said. We don't. Coley looked at his team, arrayed in the timber around him, faces turned toward him with the patient, exhausted attention of people who had been moving and fighting for hours and were now waiting to be told what to do next, because that was what they were trained to do. Trust the man who was supposed to know, even when the man who was supposed to know was standing in a frozen forest with imperfect information and no good options. Alternative extract point, he said to Voss. Somewhere defensible, helicopter accessible, not the obvious call. Your terrain knowledge. Give me something. She thought. He could see her working through it, the map she carried in her head, 17 days of this mountain, every contour and shadow and gap. It took her 20 seconds, which was a long time for her. The east face of the second summit ridge has a rockfall shelf at 1,200 meters, she said. It's exposed, but it's triangulated between three rock faces that would make a ground assault from the south extremely difficult. The approach is a single-file chimney climb, maybe 60 meters. She paused. The north side is accessible by helicopter. It's not a prepared LZ. The pilots would earn their pay, but it's not the logging plateau. How long to get there from here? For this team, in current condition? She looked at Singh and Okafor without making it obvious that was what she was doing. 70 minutes. The QRF was 90 minutes out when Voss had last spoken to Calloway. Maybe 75 now. Cole checked his watch. The math was tight in one direction and impossible in the other. We need to transmit, he said. Now. New coordinates, new extract point. He looked at the radio. Location? I can transmit from here, Voss said. It's not the clean window I had before, but the satellite pass is still partial. I'll get 30, maybe 40 seconds of clean signal. Enough? If I'm fast. She was already adjusting the radio. I need the grid for the rockfall shelf. I need the grid too, Cole said. She told him the coordinates from memory, then transmitted them to Calloway's channel with the efficiency of someone who had been communicating in tight windows under pressure long enough that 30 seconds felt like plenty. The transmission went out and she killed the radio immediately after. They waited. No response came because the satellite window closed before a return signal could cycle. Either Calloway got it or she didn't. Move, Cole said. 70 minutes became 85, not because of decisions, because of Singh, whose leg wound had begun seeping through the dressing around the 40-minute mark, and Okafor, who went gray in the face on the steepest section of the approach and needed a 15-minute stop before his blood pressure returned to something Diaz considered compatible with continued vertical movement, and the terrain itself, which was indifferent to their timeline in the way terrain always was. The rockfall shelf was exactly what Voss had described. A broad ledge of granite debris on the east face, open sky above, 3 walls of rock on the other sides, and an approach from the south that was a single chimney climb that one person could hold against a squad if they had ammunition and a good enough reason. They came up through the chimney in pairs, the wounded men going last with the most people around them, Voss at the top already when Cole came through, braced in the rock with the SIG in her right hand covering the chimney exit, because the tactical logic of someone coming up through a choke point required someone at the top covering it. Cole came out onto the shelf and straightened and looked north. Open sky. A wind that came at them clean and cold off the summit ridge. No trees. Nothing between them and the horizon but rock and air. He checked his watch. 0849. Calloway's QRF, if it had received the new coordinates, would be at Kessler departure plus 90 minutes, which put it somewhere overhead in the next 10 to 20 minutes. If it hadn't received the new coordinates, the birds would be going to the logging plateau, and the logging plateau was 2 kilometers south of their current position, and either it was clean ground or it wasn't, nothing to do but wait and hold. Cole put the team into the shelf's natural cover. What rock there was, the fallen debris, the shadows at the base of the east wall, and set watch on the chimney and the northern approach and the southern skyline. 3 sectors, 4 men, alternating. Everyone else rested, which for most of them meant sitting against rock with weapons across their laps and eyes that were open but focused on something 1,000 yards past what they were actually looking at. Webb sat beside Cole at the northern edge and looked at the sky. If the birds go to the plateau, Webb said. I know, Cole said. Do we go back? We can't get back in time to redirect them. Cole looked at the radio. Calloway's personal frequency, the one from the card. He could transmit direct right now without waiting for a satellite window. But direct transmission on that frequency would light up every intercept scanner in the operational area and give away the position of the rockfall shelf as clearly as a flare. He looked at Voss, who was sitting apart from the team by her habitual 2 meters, the lapua across her knees, eyes closed. Not sleeping. Her posture was wrong for sleep. Too upright. Too controlled. Managing something. Pain, probably. The leg that had been running on overrides for too long and was now presenting its bill. Voss, he said. She opened her eyes. The direct channel to Calloway. If I transmit on it, we give away this position. Yes. If I don't, and the birds went to the plateau, then they either figure it out and come looking, or they're walking into whatever is waiting at the plateau. She held his look. If someone is waiting at the plateau. You think someone is waiting at the plateau? She was quiet for a moment. The channeling was too precise. Everything pushed us toward the obvious choice, and the obvious choice was the logging plateau. I gave you that answer, and it was genuinely the best tactical answer, and whoever designed this operation counted on people making good tactical decisions. Her jaw tightened slightly. Which means I played into it. You gave me the best ground, Cole said. That's your job. My job was supposed to be observation. Yeah, well, Cole looked north. Jobs change. She almost said something. He could see it. The breath she drew in, the fractional shift in her expression toward something personal. And then she didn't say it, and went back to watching the chimney. Cole made the call. Webb, fire up the direct channel. Keep it short. New coordinates. Our position. Tell her to adjust. 5 seconds of transmission, then cut. Webb looked at him. That lights us up. I know. Do it. Webb did it. 5 seconds, lean and fast. The new grid reference and the word adjust, and then silence. The radio went off. Cole looked at the chimney, at the south wall, at the sky. For 2 minutes, nothing. Then Hayes, on the south watch, said, Movement, chimney, someone coming up. Every rifle in the shelf came up simultaneously. How many? Cole said. Can't tell yet. Single file, chimney's too narrow. Voss, Cole said. She was already moving. Not to cover, but to the chimney edge, lying flat, looking over. She looked for 3 seconds, then pulled back. 4, she said. Military movement. Different kit from the Valley fighters. This is closer to what you were wearing on insertion. Friendly? Webb said. I don't know. She looked at Cole. The kid is right. The movement style is trained, but the Valley fighters were also trained. Cole thought for exactly 3 seconds. Challenge, he said. He raised his voice to the chimney edge. Identify yourself. A pause from below, then a voice, male, controlled. Raptor, this is Phantom 2-1. General Calloway sends her regards and says to tell you the word moderate is not how she would have phrased it. Cole looked at Webb. Webb exhaled through his nose. Come up, Cole called. The 4 men who came through the chimney were Tier 1. The kit, the faces, the way they moved through the confined exit and immediately spread to cover arcs without being told. Their team leader was a chief warrant officer named Garza, who was approximately Cole's age and had eyes that had seen a similar number of things and processed them in a similar way. Garza looked around the shelf, the wounded, the team's exhaustion, the woman in the ghillie suit who was watching the chimney exit and not particularly interested in introductions. We got the redirect, Garza said to Cole. Came straight here. The logging plateau? Cole said. Garza's expression shifted fractionally. We overflew it. South side had a ground element in position. Maybe 20 fighters, good cover, waiting. He paused. They weren't there to wave us in. The shelf went quiet. Not just quiet. It went to the specific stillness of people receiving confirmation of something they'd feared. Singh said from his position against the wall. So she was right. Nobody responded to that immediately, but several people looked at Voss, who was not looking at any of them. She was looking south, the direction the logging plateau was. At the horizon, she couldn't see from this rock shelf, her face doing the thing it always did when she was running a calculation and not particularly enjoying the result. QRF configuration? Cole asked Garza. 2 birds. I left my second element with the primary. They're holding at a ridge LZ 2 kilometers north. Medically configured. Your wounded can be treated en route. He looked at Okafor, at Singh. The arm I'm not worried about. The leg I want to look at right now. Diaz, Cole said. Diaz was already moving toward Garza's medic, who had come through the chimney with a bag that was significantly heavier and better stocked than hers, and the two of them began the professional communion of medical personnel consolidating resources, which required no introduction and no ceremony. Garza turned to Cole. The woman. Cole looked at him. Calloway said to bring out whoever was with you. All of them. Garza kept his voice even. She also said there would be a debrief situation, sooner rather than later. The woman's name is Commander Lena Voss, Cole said. She's the reason 8 more of my men are alive right now. Garza absorbed that. Understood. Cole walked to where Voss was sitting and crouched down in front of her. She looked at him with eyes that had the particular quality of someone reaching the edge of a very long effort. Not broken, not relieved, just the specific blankness of a body and mind that had been running at maximum and were receiving the first credible signal that they might be allowed to stop. Extract is here, Cole said. We're going north. She looked at him for a moment, then at the team around her. Garza's men integrating smoothly, the medics working, Webb organizing the movement order with the quiet efficiency of 22 years of practice. Debrief, she said. Yes. Shadow watch. I'd expect so. She processed that. I broke every standing order I had. Yeah, Cole said. You did. So this, a pause. This is going to be complicated. Probably. He met her look. You want to know something? She waited. Every man on that shelf came up through the chimney alive, he said. The ones who aren't here. He stopped because Petrov was a weight he carried differently than the others. The way you always carried the first loss of a specific operation. We got 11 out of 12 through a valley ambush, a mortar, 80 fighters, and a coordinated northern sweep on terrain that was prepared against us, with 2 wounded and 3 rounds. He kept his voice flat, because flat was the only way he could say it right now. That math doesn't work without you. She looked at him for a long time. Something moved in her expression. Something she let move this time, didn't close the door on it before it reached her face. It was complicated, and it was human, and it lasted about 4 seconds, and then she controlled it again. The debrief is going to be very uncomfortable, she said. Probably, Cole said again. They might shut down the program entirely. Might. They might. She stopped, started again. There are people at command level who would prefer I stayed on that ridge. Those people, Cole said carefully, are going to have to explain a dead JSOC liaison, a compromised operation, and a cell that put 12 soldiers into a prepared kill zone. They're going to have a lot of things to explain before they get around to explaining you. He stood up. And I plan to be in the room when they start explaining. She looked up at him from the rock. The ghillie suit was torn at the right shoulder. He hadn't noticed that before, the fabric shredded by something he hadn't asked about. The rifle was across her lap, and her right hand was resting on the stock with a familiarity that was automatic. The way a person rested their hand on something they'd carried so long, it had become part of their body's geography. You don't owe me anything, she said. It wasn't false modesty, it was a statement of genuine surprise, the kind that came from a person who had been operating for a long time under the assumption that nobody was tracking the debt. I owe Petrov's family a letter I don't know how to write, Cole said quietly. Everything else is gravy. He held out his hand. She looked at it. Then she took it, and he pulled her to her feet, and she stood on the rock shelf in the cold morning wind, with her weight on her good leg, and looked at the team around her. People who had come up through a chimney and spread to cover arcs, and were now treating each other's wounds and checking each other's ammunition and doing all the small human things that soldiers did in the aftermath of surviving something together. She had been alone on a mountain for 17 days. Before that, she had been alone in the particular way that classified programs made you alone, present in the world, visible to almost no one. She looked at Cole's hand, which she was still holding, and let go of it. All right, she said, let's move. The chimney exit was behind them. The northern sky, where the second QRF bird was holding at a ridge LZ 2 kilometers out, was ahead. And below them on the south face, at the logging plateau where 20 fighters had been waiting in good cover, Someone was going to have to explain why the ambush they'd laid so carefully had come up empty. Garza's voice in Cole's earpiece. Raptor, Phantom 2-1. Primary bird is inbound. LZ in 4 minutes. Cole keyed his radio. Copy. We're ready. The shelf began to move, 12 men and 1 woman, organized in the instinctive way of people who had stopped being strangers somewhere in the dark of the last few hours, moving toward the sound of rotors coming in from the north. Voss moved with them, no longer at the habitual 2-meter remove, no longer at the edge of the group. Just present, just there, moving with them. The rotors grew louder, and the mountain wind carried the sound down the east face, and for the first time in 17 days, the sound of something mechanical in the air above Ravenfall Ridge meant help instead of threat. Nobody said anything about that. They didn't need to. The helicopter was a modified Black Hawk with the interior stripped down to accommodate a medical configuration, fold-down litter brackets on both sides, IV lines already hanging from the overhead rails. A flight medic named Torres, who had the economical movements of someone who worked in confined spaces under noise and vibration, and had long since stopped being bothered by any of it. They loaded Singh first, then Okafor, then the rest of the team in the order Garza's men directed, which was efficient and unhurried and spoke of people who had done extracts like this enough times that the choreography was automatic. Cole went in last, the way he always did, and found a position on the port side bench where he could see his team. Voss was across from him. She had the lapua between her knees, muzzle down, her hands folded over the receiver the way you secured a weapon when you were in an aircraft and there was nothing left to shoot at. The ghillie suit was torn at the shoulder and the right leg of her trousers had been cut by Diaz at some point during the movement, and her leg was wrapped in fresh dressing that was already showing a faint bloom of red at the center. She was looking at the floor. The bird lifted and banked north, and the mountain fell away below them. And through the port window, Cole watched Ravenfall Ridge shrink. The valley, the pass, the eastern ridgeline, where Voss had spent 17 days alone in the cold, watching the world below her and being watched by nobody. From the air, it looked small. It always looked small from the air. The places where terrible things happened always looked small from the air, and Cole had never decided whether that was comforting or insulting. Webb leaned over and said something into Cole's ear that the rotor noise swallowed, but Cole caught the word Devereaux and nodded. They had about 40 minutes before Kessler forward, and 40 minutes was long enough to sleep if you were capable of sleeping, which Cole wasn't. He was running on the other side of the adrenaline now, not the hot side but the cold side, the side where the brain kept replaying decisions and asking whether different choices would have changed the math on Petrov. He knew from experience that this was not a useful cognitive exercise. He did it anyway. Across from him, Voss raised her head at some point and looked out the starboard window at nothing, at the flat winter sky, and Cole watched her and thought about the debrief that was coming, and about what he knew and what he didn't know, and how those two categories were going to collide with people who had made very deliberate choices about what they wanted to be knowable. Kessler Forward Operating Base was not large, a collection of hardened structures and prefab buildings on a plateau that had been scraped flat by equipment and cold logic, the kind of installation that existed because a location required a presence, and not for any reason that the surrounding landscape would have endorsed. It had a flight line, a medical facility that was better than it looked, a tactical operations center that was better than that, and a skiff that was 3 layers of security below the TOC and that Cole had been in exactly once 2 years ago for a reason he was not permitted to discuss. The birds touched down at 10:22. Singh and Okafor went to the medical facility immediately, Torres walking alongside the litters with the IV bags held overhead, speaking to the receiving medics in the shorthand of people relaying information to other people who already knew most of it. Diaz went with them, and Cole let her go, because Diaz would not have accepted not going regardless of what he said about it. The rest of the team was directed to a debrief holding area, a prefab room with metal chairs and a folding table and a coffee maker that was producing something that smelled approximately like coffee. Webb made a cup immediately. Several others followed. It was the first warm thing any of them had touched in hours, and the room went quiet in the specific way of people performing the small animal comfort of wrapping their hands around something warm. Voss was taken somewhere else. Not roughly, Two men in the non-uniform of people who worked in the space between organizations came to the door of the holding area and said her name, and she stood up from the chair she'd just sat down in and looked at Cole, and he looked back at her, and there was a communication in that look that was not quite reassurance because he wasn't in a position to reassure anyone about what was coming, but that was something, and then she left with them and the door closed. Webb came and stood beside Cole. "Skiff," Webb said. "Probably," Cole said. "You gonna let that happen?" Cole looked at the closed door. "I'm going to give it 20 minutes. He gave it 17 minutes. Brigadier General Ruth Calloway was not what people expected when they met her, which was something she had spent 31 years leveraging to considerable effect. She was compact and unremarkable looking in the way that certain very competent people were unremarkable looking, with gray hair cut practically, and reading glasses that she wore on a lanyard and used as a prop when she was thinking. She was sitting in the TOC when Cole found her, behind a workstation with 2 screens running, a coffee mug at her right hand that was not her first. She looked up when he came in. "Cole?" she said. "General?" He stopped across the workstation from her. "Where is she?" "Voss is being processed." Calloway held his look. "Sit down." "I'll stand." She studied him for a moment. The state of his kit, his face, the specific quality of a man who had been awake and in contact for a sustained period and was running on something past the second wind. "How bad was it?" "We lost Petrov on the south slope. The rest got out." He kept his voice even. "The ambush was pre-planned and pre-positioned. Someone knew our insertion window, our frequencies, and our approach corridor." "I know." "You know." "I've known since 0400 this morning," Calloway said, "when I received your transmission and started making calls." She took the reading glasses off the lanyard and held them in her left hand. "Sit down, Ethan. I'm not the problem in this room." He sat. She set the glasses on the workstation. The operation was run out of a subcell within the Regional Planning Directorate. 3 people with the access level to have built the brief. The way it was built. Intelligence confidence rated down. Insertion corridor not varied from the standard approach. Frequencies not rotated as protocol requires. She paused. Devereaux found it. He found it 11 days ago and made the mistake of going to his chain of command instead of outside it. "And his chain of command killed him," Cole said. "His chain of command had him killed," Calloway said, which was a meaningful distinction, and she made it carefully. "The cardiac ruling was arranged. I have the pathology report. It was reviewed by a single physician who is attached to the same directorate and who signed off in 40 minutes, which is not how a pathology report on a military officer is reviewed." Cole sat with that. He'd known it was coming. The shape of it had been visible since Voss told him about the 11 days. But knowing the shape and hearing it confirmed were different things. "The subcell. Who's running it?" Calloway looked at him with an expression that said the answer was complicated and the complication was not academic. "That's being investigated." "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I have right now." She leaned forward slightly. "What I can tell you is that the investigation is running outside the directorate, outside the regional command, and is being handled by people I trust personally. That's as much as I can give you." Cole looked at her. "Voss?" "Yes." "She's not the problem either." "Voss broke her standing orders, activated a classified observation asset in a direct action capacity, and exposed a program that does not officially exist," Calloway said. "There are people in this building right now who are very interested in that. There are people in this building right now who are very interested in making her the story so they don't have to be the story," Cole said. "Which is different." Calloway was quiet for a moment. She picked up her coffee mug and looked into it like it might have something useful in it, and apparently decided it didn't. "Tell me what she did." So Cole told her. Not a debrief. A debrief had a format and a recorder and a written product at the end, and this was not that. This was one soldier telling another soldier what had happened in the sequence it happened, without inflection or advocacy, just the events. The first shot that killed the Valley commander, the second that destroyed the crew-served weapon, the pass, the 3 rounds, the terrain navigation, the intercept of the false retrieval signal, the 2 fighters on the northeast contour, the chimney, the rockfall shelf. He told her about the logging plateau, about the 20 fighters waiting there in good cover for a QRF that would have been walking into a second kill zone. Calloway listened without interrupting. Her face did something during the logging plateau part, a compression around the eyes that she controlled, but not quite fast enough. She changed the extract point, Calloway said. On my order, but she identified the threat. Cole kept his eyes on Calloway. Without that call, your QRF birds go into a prepared ambush. We add more casualties to a night that already has one. I understand. Do the people processing her understand? Calloway set down the mug. The people processing her are doing their jobs. Shadowwatch protocol requires immediate isolation and debrief of any asset that has been in the field, unsupported for more than 72 hours. That's not punitive, it's procedural. And after procedural? After procedural, there will be a formal review. She met his look, which is where it gets complicated. Tell me. She was quiet for a moment, not reluctant, assembling. Shadowwatch has two factions inside it right now. One faction views Voss as an asset who made an independent judgment call that saved an operation and multiple lives, and who should be protected and reintegrated. The other faction views her as a liability. She knows the program, she knows the breach, she knows Devereaux's name, and she's been off the grid for 17 days in conditions that the second faction considers compromising. Compromising meaning they don't know what she saw or who she talked to, Cole said. She talked to you, Calloway said. She talked to me. And to your team. 11 people outside the program who now know Shadowwatch exists, who know Devereaux exists, who know the program had an asset on Ravenfall Ridge. She let that sit for a moment. I'm not saying this is my view. I'm telling you what the second faction is saying. Cole thought about Voss sitting in whatever room they'd put her in, with the ghillie suit and the leg wound and 17 days of mountain behind her and a career's worth of invisible work that nobody would ever put in a citation because it was never supposed to be known. He thought about what it meant to be the second faction's preferred outcome. What's her status? He said. Currently, she's being debriefed by a Shadowwatch internal officer. That's Lieutenant Colonel Marsh, who I will tell you is not... Calloway paused, chose her word carefully. Marsh is not someone who will go easy on her. I want to be in that room. You're not authorized. I want to be in that room, Cole said again. Calloway looked at him for a long moment. The reading glasses went back on the lanyard. She reached for the coffee mug, thought better of it, pushed back from the workstation. Give me 10 minutes, she said. The room was underground, which Cole noted as significant. Not the skiff. A different space, smaller, with a table bolted to the floor, and chairs that were the metal folding kind, and a single overhead light that was fluorescent and indifferent. Voss was at the table. The ghillie suit was gone. She was in a gray base layer that someone had provided, and that fit badly, too large in the shoulders, and her right leg was extended under the table. The leg had been freshly dressed at some point, clean white against the gray fabric. Across from her was Lieutenant Colonel Marsh, who was exactly what Calloway's pause had implied. A trim man in his 50s with a face that had defaulted into a permanent skepticism, a legal pad in front of him covered in handwriting, and the quality of a person who had been conducting interviews in bad-lit rooms for long enough that he'd stopped needing the room to be anything except a place where he asked questions. Cole came through the door with Calloway behind him, and Marsh looked up. Captain, Marsh said, this is a restricted debrief. I'm aware, Cole said. He pulled out the chair beside Voss and sat down. Marsh looked at Calloway. The captain was the senior officer on the ground, Calloway said. He has material knowledge of the events being reviewed. She sat down at the end of the table. Continue, Colonel. Marsh studied Cole for a moment with the specific calculation of a man deciding which version of a confrontation was most productive, and then he turned back to Voss. Commander Voss, he said, you testified that on day 17 of your observation period, at approximately 22:47 hours, you fired 2 rounds from your assigned long arm at targets in the valley below your observation position. That's correct, Voss said. And your standing orders were observe and report, no direct action, no exposure of position. She said it before he finished, the way you recited something you'd been saying to yourself for a while. I know what my orders were. And you violated them. Yes. Marsh made a note. Why? Not a question. A one-word demand, the interrogator's version of a blank check. Voss looked at him steadily, and Cole looked at her and thought, be careful. Because the first target was the enemy commander who was about to execute the final phase of an encirclement that would have killed 12 soldiers, she said, and because I was the only asset in range with the capability to prevent it. Your orders, I understand my orders, Colonel. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The program's standing protocol on direct action prohibition exists because Shadow Watch observation assets have inherent intelligence value that outweighs most tactical interventions. I accept that rationale. She paused. It doesn't apply to watching soldiers die when I have the capability to prevent it. That determination is not yours to make. No handler was reachable. No command channel was responsive. I'd been attempting contact for 13 days. She looked at him with something in her expression that was not confrontation exactly, but was the closest she got to it. Who, specifically, should I have asked? Marsh wrote something. Your last authorized contact with Major Devereaux was on day 4 of your observation period. Correct. And you made subsequent contact attempts on days, he consulted the pad, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 13, and 16. And day 15, she said. Your notes are missing day 15. Marsh looked at the pad. Day 15. 1,400 hours, 2 attempts. I can give you the precise transmission timestamps from the radio log if you need them. She said it without heat. Just fact. Marsh made a note. Cole watched Marsh make the note and thought about what it meant that Marsh's notes were incomplete and that Voss had the precise transmission timestamps in her head without needing to reference anything. Commander Voss, Marsh said, and now there was a shift in his register, toward something that was not quite confrontational and not quite sympathetic, and occupied the middle territory of someone who was about to say something they'd decided to say before they came in the room. Your record with Shadow Watch includes a prior incident of independent action. Voss was still. Operation Grey Wing, Marsh said, 14 months ago. Your observation position in the Khazar Valley identified an imminent threat to an exfiltrating asset team. You transmitted the threat warning through authorized channels. He paused. The authorized channels failed to relay the warning in time. The exfil team lost 2 personnel. The room was quiet. You subsequently filed a formal complaint alleging that the failure to relay was not a system failure, but a deliberate delay, Marsh continued. That complaint was reviewed and determined to be unsubstantiated. It was reviewed by people within the same command chain that failed to relay the warning, Voss said. That's a separate matter. It's not a separate matter. She kept her voice level with visible effort. It's the same matter. Greywing is why my handler protocol was designed the way it was. Direct line to Devereaux, bypass the relay chain. Because Devereaux agreed that the relay chain had a problem. She looked at the legal pad. And then Devereaux went dark. And then Devereaux was dead. And the relay chain is still in place and still run by the same people who reviewed my complaint and found it unsubstantiated. Marsh said nothing for a moment. Cole said, Greywing. The 2 personnel who were lost, who were they? Marsh looked at him. That's classified. I'd like Commander Voss to tell me. Marsh looked at Voss. Voss looked at Cole, and something in her face shifted. The door that usually opened and closed quickly, the one that showed something complicated behind it. This time it held open a moment longer. Martinez and Cho, she said, Sergeant First Class Elena Martinez and Corporal James Cho. They were part of a 3-man exfil team. The 3rd made it out. You observed their exfil, Cole said. I observed everything. She said it very quietly. I transmitted the threat warning 17 minutes before the ambush. 17 minutes was enough time to redirect them. The relay failure... She stopped, started again. The relay failure took 11 minutes to acknowledge my transmission. By then the ambush was in progress. And the complaint you filed said the delay was deliberate. The delay was deliberate, she said, without the qualifier I believe or I alleged. She said it the way she said coordinates, as a fact that existed independent of whether anyone accepted it. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Marsh had stopped writing. Cole leaned forward slightly. Colonel Marsh, is there an active investigation into the Greywing relay failure? That's Calloway, Cole said without looking away from Marsh. Calloway said, There is now. Marsh turned to look at her. The investigation into Major Devereaux's death, Calloway said, in the level voice of a general who has chosen her words in advance and is now delivering them, has produced preliminary evidence of a pattern of deliberate interference with time-sensitive transmissions within the regional relay chain. That investigation has been widened to include historical incidents. She paused. Including Greywing. The room was very quiet. Marsh looked at his legal pad, at Voss, at Cole, at Calloway. I was doing the calculation that Cole had watched people do before, the calculation of which way the institutional weight was going to fall and whether your position was on the right side of it or not. It was not a dignified calculation, but it was a human one. He closed the legal pad. "I'll need to make some calls," he said. "I'll need Commander Voss released to medical care while you do," Cole said. Marsh looked at him with the look of a man who had just had the ground shift under a position he'd thought was solid, and who was deciding not to waste energy on the shift itself. He stood, picked up the legal pad, and walked out of the room without saying anything else. The door closed. Voss sat in the chair with her extended leg and her ill-fitting base layer and looked at the table surface. She was not visibly shaking. She was doing the breathing that Cole recognized, writing it down, managing. "Martinez and Cho," Cole said. "Yes." "You've been carrying Greywing for 14 months. She didn't answer immediately. Then, "I filed the complaint because I thought it would matter, because I thought if the right people saw the timeline." She stopped. "It didn't matter." The right people decided it didn't matter. She looked at her hands on the table. "So I went back to the ridge, and I kept observing, and I kept transmitting, and I tried to believe that the system had a logic to it that I was missing. And then the system stopped responding to your transmissions," Cole said. "And then your team came in." She looked at him, "And I had a decision to make." Cole looked at her for a moment. "The first shot. The Valley Commander. That wasn't a quick reaction." "No," she said. "I'd had him in the scope for 6 minutes." 6 minutes. He thought about what 6 minutes of a decision felt like, holding still in a ghillie suit at altitude with your finger not yet on the trigger while everything below you was moving toward a conclusion that was going to be permanent. What changed at 6 minutes? She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Cole thought she wasn't going to answer. "One of your men tried to pull a wounded soldier behind cover," she said finally. "He exposed himself to do it. The enemy had a bead on him, 10 seconds maybe before someone would have taken the shot." She looked at the table. "I didn't think about Greywing. I didn't think about my orders. I'd already made the decision. I'd made it a long time ago. I just hadn't had the circumstances to know it yet." Cole sat with that. Calloway, who had been quiet since Marsh left, said, "I'm going to recommend a formal recognition review for Commander Voss's actions on Ravenfall Ridge." Voss looked at her. "The Shadow Watch protocol review will happen regardless," Calloway said. "But the protocol review is going to have to live alongside a documented record of what those actions produced, who they saved." She kept her voice measured, the voice of someone who had been in institutions long enough to know exactly how institutional outcomes were shaped and who was shaping this one deliberately. "That documentation starts with statements from everyone on Raptor Team." "They'll give them," Cole said. "I know they will." She looked at Voss. "Commander, medical. Now please." Voss started to stand and the leg announced its position clearly. She caught the table edge with one hand and held there for a moment. The brief exposure of a body that had been asked to do more than it wanted to and had done it anyway and was now presenting its accounting. Cole stood and offered his arm without comment. She looked at it. "You did the same thing on the rock shelf," he said. "That was different." "Why?" A pause. "The shelf was tactical." "This is also tactical," Cole said. "You can't walk into a recognition review on a leg that won't support you. Take the arm." She took the arm. They walked out of the underground room and into the corridor and up toward the medical facility. And Cole matched her pace, which was slow and uneven, and didn't rush it, and she didn't lean on him any more than was necessary, and he didn't offer more than she used, and that was about as good a working arrangement as two people who had known each other for approximately 8 hours in the worst possible conditions could manage. Webb was in the corridor outside the medical facility, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and his eyes open, which meant he'd been waiting. He looked at the two of them approaching. "Okafor's stable," he said. "Surgery on the arm was clean. Singh's leg is going to need another procedure, but the surgeon says he keeps it." He paused. "Reyes is fine. Hayes is fine. Everyone is, we're all." He stopped, because Webb was not a man who struggled with words, and the struggling was itself information. "Sit rep," Cole said. Webb looked at Voss. "She going to be all right?" "When she gets off this leg, yes." "Then yeah." Webb pushed off the wall. "Sit rep as we made it, all things considered." He looked at Voss with the direct look of a man who had been assessing people for 22 years and had reached a conclusion. "You changed the extract point." "Yes," she said. "The logging plateau." "Yes." "I'd been thinking about the logging plateau for 2 hours," Webb said. "I thought it was good ground. I was ready to call it." He paused. "You saw what I missed." Voss looked at him. "I'd had 17 days on that terrain. You had a sketch in the snow." "Yeah." He nodded, once the way Cole nodded, without excess. "Well, appreciate it." He opened the medical facility door and held it. Voss went through. Cole followed. And Webb came last, letting the door close behind them. And inside the facility, the light was warm and the smell was antiseptic. And from somewhere in the back room came the sound of Diaz's voice, steady and precise, giving post-operative instructions to someone who was probably Okafor and was probably trying to argue with her and was probably not winning. Cole found a chair in the waiting area and sat down for the first time since Kessler, and the chair was hard plastic, and it was the best thing he'd felt in 9 hours. He closed his eyes and thought about Petrov. He thought about the letter he was going to have to write. He thought about what you said to a family in Spokane, Washington, about a 23-year-old with a baseball card collection. He thought about whether any arrangement of words in a letter like that was sufficient, and he arrived at the conclusion he always arrived at, which was that it wasn't, and that you wrote it anyway, because the alternative was silence, and silence was worse. He opened his eyes. Across the waiting area, Voss was sitting in the chair a medic had directed her to, her leg elevated on a second chair, and she was looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone who had nothing left to manage and was learning, slowly, what that felt like after a very long time of having everything to manage. She was not at the 2-meter remove. She was just sitting in a chair in a warm room where people who had been through the same night were also sitting in chairs. And if that was not a definition of somewhere she belonged, Cole was not sure what was. 3 weeks after Kessler forward, the letter to Petrov's family still wasn't finished. Cole had started it 6 times. The first attempt was formal, the language of official condolence, the phrases that the Army had refined over generations into something that was technically correct and emotionally inert. He deleted it after 2 paragraphs. The second attempt went the other direction, too personal, trying to explain who Petrov had been in the team and how his absence had a specific shape that the others navigated around without discussing, and that it felt like transferring his own grief onto people who had enough of their own. He deleted that one too. The current version, sitting on his laptop on the desk of the temporary quarters he'd been assigned at Fort Archdale while the investigation ran its course, was 4 sentences long and had been 4 sentences long for 9 days. He read it again, deleted it, closed the laptop. Outside his window, the November sky over Archdale was the same flat gray it had been every morning since he arrived. Low clouds that sat on the tree line and didn't move, the kind of weather that made the world feel like it had a ceiling. He'd been in briefings every day. The investigation, the formal debrief, the after-action review that was technically a review of operational procedures and was actually a very careful institutional exercise in determining who had failed and how visibly that failure needed to be acknowledged. The subcell within the Regional Planning Directorate had 3 names in it when the investigation closed its first phase. Cole learned them from Calloway in a meeting that lasted 22 minutes and left him with the specific feeling of looking at an answer that explained everything and resolved nothing. 2 of the 3 names had already been placed on administrative suspension. The third, the one who had built the brief, who had written moderate on the intelligence confidence line, who had known about Devereaux and made a decision about Devereaux, was a colonel named Harwick who had submitted his retirement papers 48 hours after the investigation went active. Retirement papers. 22 years of service, a full pension, a house somewhere that wasn't here. Cole had sat in Calloway's office and looked at the wall behind her head for a moment. "That's it?" he said. "Criminal referral is pending," Calloway said. "The retirement doesn't stop the referral." "Will the referral stick?" Calloway had looked at him with the expression of a woman who had been in this institution long enough to know the difference between what should happen and what typically happened, and who was not willing to lie to him, but also was not willing to say the true thing out loud in an office with walls. "The referral is pending," she said again. Cole had nodded and left. Voss was at Archdale too, in a different section of the installation, in a different administrative limbo. The Shadow Watch review had produced a preliminary finding 2 weeks in, not a censure, not a clearance, but the specific institutional non-answer of findings pending further review, which meant that people who needed to make a decision had decided to wait and see which way the weight came down before they committed to a position. Cole knew she was there because Webb had found out and told him, the way Webb found out things. Through the network of relationships that 22 years of service built, people who owed Webb a professional courtesy or who simply respected him enough to answer when he asked a question. He hadn't gone to see her, not because he'd decided not to, because he hadn't decided anything, which was its own kind of decision, and he knew it. He was navigating the specific difficulty of a situation where his advocacy for her was both genuine and also complicated by the fact that it had been 9 hours on a mountain, which was not a long time and was also, in his experience, longer than some things that had mattered more than their duration suggested they should. On a Tuesday, 17 days after Kessler, Webb knocked on his door. Cole opened it. "She's been called to the review board," Webb said. "This afternoon, 1400. "I know," Cole said. He'd gotten the notification that morning through official channels. As a material witness, he'd been listed as available for questioning. He hadn't been summoned, but available. Webb looked at him. "You going?" "Yes," Cole said. "Good," Webb said. And then, because Webb was Webb, "She's not going to ask you to." "I know that too. Just making sure you know." He pushed off the doorframe. 1400. The review board was in the main administrative building, in a conference room that was several levels above the underground fluorescent space where Marsh had conducted his initial debrief. This room had windows. The gray sky outside was the same, but the windows were a concession to the fact that what happened here was supposed to look different from what happened in rooms without them. 4 people at the table, 2 Cole didn't know. One he recognized as a deputy director of a joint program office, whose name he knew from briefing documents, and Colonel Marsh, whose legal pad was in front of him, and whose expression was different from the underground room. More careful. The way a person's expression became more careful when the ground under their position had shifted and they were still calculating the new geometry. Voss was already seated at the single chair across the table when Cole came in. She looked at him when he entered, and her face did not do the door-opening thing and did not do the closing thing either. It did something more neutral than both of those. The expression of a person who had been sitting in front of official bodies for 17 days and had learned to keep their reactions off their face, regardless of what was walking through the door. Cole sat to the side, not at the table, observer position, which was what his status entitled him to. The deputy director ran the board. His name was Kessler, which Cole found briefly ironic given the FOB, and he conducted the review with the measured pace of someone who had read everything and was now performing the ritual of entering it into the record. He walked through Voss's operational history, 12 years. Shadow Watch from its formation, observation deployments across 7 theaters, commendations that existed in classified folders that would never be in a public record. Then Grey Wing. Cole watched Voss during the Grey Wing section. She sat still. The leg was better. She was bearing weight on it now, moving without the compensation hitch. And she sat with both feet flat on the floor and her hands on the table and listened to the summary of Grey Wing with the expression of someone listening to an account of a thing they had lived and that was being rendered in language that captured its shape but not its weight. The Grey Wing relay failure, Kessler said, has been reviewed as part of the wider investigation into the regional planning subcell. It has been determined that the 11-minute delay in relaying Commander Voss's threat warning was not a system failure, but a deliberate act by personnel within the relay chain. He paused. The complaint filed by Commander Voss 14 months ago has been retroactively substantiated. The room was quiet. Marsh wrote something on the legal pad. Voss said nothing. Cole looked at her hands on the table. They were flat, still, and there was something in the stillness that was not relief and not vindication, and was closer to the feeling of a weight being formally acknowledged that had been real the entire time and had never required acknowledgement to be real. "Commander Voss," Kessler said, "regarding your actions on Ravenfall Ridge, the board has reviewed the operational record, the statements of Captain Cole and members of Raptor Team, the tactical analysis of the extract sequence, and the preliminary findings of the investigation into the compromised operation." He looked at her over reading glasses that were the same institutional prop that Calloway used, Cole noticed. Maybe it was something they taught at a certain grade. The board finds that your decision to engage in direct action on Ravenfall Ridge, while a violation of standing Shadowwatch protocol, was made under conditions that the protocol did not anticipate. Specifically, sustained loss of handler contact, confirmed program compromise, and the presence of imminent lethal threat to personnel who could not be protected by any other available means. Voss was looking at him with her level look. The board further finds that your actions materially contributed to the survival of 11 of 12 personnel on Raptor Team, the prevention of a secondary ambush against a QRF extraction element, and the preservation of operational intelligence regarding the compromised subcell. He paused. The formal censure will not be entered. The room was quiet again, a different quality of quiet. One of the board members Cole didn't know said, "The Shadowwatch protocol review is ongoing. Commander Voss, you'll remain on administrative status pending its completion. However," he glanced at Kessler, "the board has reviewed a request submitted by Captain Cole regarding Commander Voss's potential attachment to Raptor Team during the protocol review period." Cole had submitted that request 11 days ago, through Calloway's office, in language that was carefully administrative and that said, in essence, "She has nowhere to go while you figure out what to do with her, and my team has a gap, and those two facts are solvable with one decision." Voss turned her head and looked at him. He looked back at her. "The request is approved on a provisional basis," Kessler said. 90 days, subject to the protocol review outcome." Marsh, who had been quiet for most of the proceedings, said, "Noted for the record." He said it in the tone of a man noting something he had chosen not to oppose, which was different from endorsing it and was also different from blocking it, and Cole suspected that was precisely the calculation Marsh had done. Kessler closed the folder in front of him. "That concludes the formal review. Commander Voss, you'll receive written notification within 48 hours." He stood, the others stood, and the board members began the exit choreography of people who had delivered their findings and were done with the room. Cole stayed seated. Voss stayed seated. When the room was empty except for the two of them and the gray window light, she turned in her chair and looked at him with an expression that was genuinely unguarded in a way he hadn't seen on her face before. Not the door opening briefly, but the door open and staying open, the thing behind it visible. "You submitted that request 11 days ago," she said. "Yes." "Before the review outcome?" "Yes." "So you didn't know how it was going to go?" "No," Cole said. "But I knew what the request should say regardless of how it went." He paused. "The gap in my team is real. That part wasn't advocacy." "And the other part?" He considered that for a moment. "Petrov was my medic. He was 23 and he was good at his job and he's not here and nobody is going to be Petrov. But there's a gap, and there's a person who knows how to operate in the places where I operate and who has skills my team doesn't have." He looked at her. "That's not a complicated calculation." "It's a 90-day provisional attachment," she said, "pending a protocol review that may or may not result in Shadowwatch pulling me back entirely." 90 days is 90 days, Cole said. "It's not nothing." She looked at him for a moment. "What if the protocol review kills the attachment?" "Then we deal with that in 90 days. That's not a plan." "No," he agreed. "It's an intention." She absorbed that. She looked at the table, at the flat gray sky outside the windows, at the empty chairs where the board had been. "Martinez and Cho," she said. "I've been thinking about them differently since—" She stopped. Started again. "Since Greywing was substantiated. I thought confirming it would feel different, like it would resolve something." "Did it?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. "They're still gone. The confirmation doesn't change what happened to them. It just means I wasn't wrong about why." "No," Cole said. "You weren't wrong." She looked at her hands. "The reason I stayed on Ravenfall after the support element was pulled. I told myself it was because my orders said maintain observation, and that was true. But that wasn't all of it." She glanced at him. "After Greywing, being on the mountain was simpler. The mountain didn't have a relay chain. It didn't have people making decisions about what information was allowed to matter. It was just terrain and mission and what I could see." She paused. "It was easier to be alone than to keep trusting a system that had—" She stopped. "That had failed you," Cole said. "That I had failed to navigate correctly," she said, which was a different thing, and it told him something about how she'd been carrying it. Not as they failed me, but as I failed to make them do better. which was the more painful version, and also the version that a certain kind of person always landed on regardless of where the actual fault was. That's not how Greywing works when you lay it out, Cole said. I know that now, she said. Knowing it and feeling it are different. Yeah, Cole said. They are. She looked at him. Does it get easier? The gap between knowing and feeling? Sometimes, Cole said. Not always. You get better at working in the gap. She seemed to consider that as a practical answer rather than a philosophical one, which was probably the right way to take it. Then she stood up from the chair, and the leg held, and she looked at the door. 90 days, she said. 90 days, Cole said. I'll need to know the team's communication protocols, equipment standards, operational tempo. She was already organizing it, the way she organized everything, into logistics, into executable steps. And I'll need to understand how Captain Cole runs a team differently from how Shadow Watch ran observation assets. We can cover that, Cole said. He stood. Webb will want to walk you through the comms setup. He's particular about it. I could tell. A pause. He's good. 22 years, Cole said. He'll tell you himself if you give him an opening. Something moved in her face that was almost a smile. Not quite, but in the neighborhood. The specific expression of someone not accustomed to the feeling and still working out whether it fit. It lasted about 2 seconds, and then she had her face back, but it had been there. They walked out of the conference room together and down the corridor toward the exit, and the day outside when they pushed through the building's main door was cold and gray and exactly what it had been every morning since Cole arrived at Archdale. Flat sky, still air, nothing particularly promising about it as a day. Webb was sitting on a concrete barrier 20 meters from the entrance, which was where Webb always was when something had been happening inside a building and he hadn't been inside it. He looked up when they came out. He looked at Voss, at Cole, at the fact that they'd come out together. Provisional attachment, he said. 90 days. Approved, Cole said. Webb stood up from the barrier and looked at Voss with the same direct look he'd given her in the medical facility corridor, the look of someone who had rendered a judgment and was confirming it. You'll want to meet Okafor, he said. He's been asking about you, not officially, but he's been asking. How is his arm, she said. He'll carry a weapon in 6 weeks, maybe 5, knowing Okafor. Webb fell into step beside them as they walked toward the main compound. Singh's leg is going to take longer. He's not happy about it. He never mentioned the wound, Voss said. During the movement. Not once. No, Webb said. He wouldn't. They walked in silence for a few steps. 3 people who had been through the same night by different routes and were now navigating the same morning. Webb, Cole said, walk Voss through the comms setup this afternoon. Already planned on it, Webb said. Then to Voss, you have strong opinions about radio protocols? Several, she said. Good, Webb said. Cole has no opinions about radio protocols. Someone on this team should. Cole said nothing to that because there was nothing useful to say, and also because it was basically true, and they kept walking. Well, he wrote the letter that night. Not a new attempt. He opened the laptop and looked at the blank document, and he just wrote it, without stopping to reconsider the language or the register or what a family in Spokane needed to hear versus what he was capable of saying. He wrote about Petrov on the approach, moving through terrain in the dark with the easy competence of a young soldier who was good at his job and knew it without needing to perform it. He wrote about the coffee that was always bad and always offered. He wrote that Petrov had made it further into an impossible night than almost anyone had a right to expect, and that the 11 men who came off that mountain had come off it partly because of the 7 months Petrov had spent being the person the team depended on, and that you couldn't draw a clean line between what someone built and what survived it. He wrote that he was sorry, that sorry was not sufficient, that he would write it anyway. He read it once. He sent it. Then he closed the laptop and looked at the ceiling of the quarters room and thought about Ravenfall Ridge, the valley, the pass, the eastern face where a woman had spent 17 days alone in the cold, doing work that nobody was supposed to know she was doing, watching a world below her that wasn't watching back. He thought about the sound of a 338 Lapua from somewhere above the clouds, 2 shots in a battlefield that had no business changing, and that changed anyway. The things that saved you were never the things you'd planned for. They were the things that broke protocol. The things that happened because someone decided that the cost of staying silent was higher than the cost of being seen. He thought about Voss in the conference room, the door in her expression finally open and staying open. He thought about 90 days, which was not a plan and was not nothing. He closed his eyes. Outside the window, the Archdale sky had cleared for the first time since he'd arrived. He could tell by the quality of the darkness, the absence of the cloud ceiling that had been pressing down for weeks. Somewhere beyond the installation's lights, there were probably stars. He didn't look. He would have to take it on trust that they were there. Some things you had to take on trust. Not because trust was easy, because the alternative, the long habit of operating alone, of believing that isolation was the safest form of protection, that the system was the thing and the people inside it were secondary. That alternative had a cost that didn't show up in any brief, at any confidence level, moderate or otherwise. It showed up in empty chairs, in letters you didn't know how to write, in women on mountains who had stopped expecting to be heard. Lena Voss had fired 2 shots when the math said she should stay silent. That had cost her everything she'd spent years building: the cover, the distance, the careful invisibility of a person who had learned to survive by being unknown. And it had been the right call anyway. Not because it was easy, because some things you did not because the system sanctioned them, or the protocol permitted them, or the chain of command would approve them, but because you looked through a scope and you saw a man trying to drag a wounded soldier to cover, and the decision had already been made long before the moment, in the long accumulation of everything you were. You fired the shot. And then you came down off the mountain. The rest? The debrief, the review boards, the provisional attachments and pending investigations and letters that took 6 attempts and still weren't right. The rest was just the work of living with the choice, which was harder than making it and also the only part that lasted. The strongest thing a person can do is not survive alone. It's decide after everything to stop.